93.3 W228CX, Indianapolis.
Drivers, start your engines.
Fans on their feet, and the green flag flies on the 2023 Indianapolis 500 into turn number 1.
We've got trouble, guys, here at pit exit. We saw Renus VK got sideways trying to peel out of his box, and Markey T-boned the pole sitter, Alex Palou. Moves the third line, and it looks like Rosenquist just tagged the wall, Michael. He's into the wall. Felix Rosenquist spins. He'll slide back into traffic. He'll clip Kyle Kirkwood. Kirkwood goes upside down. Kirkwood slides around the outside retaining wall. Felix Rosenquist car at the exit of turn number 2. Oh my goodness, what a horrible crash.
Ward's going to go to the bottom of the racetrack side by side with Marcus Erickson for second. Ward's not going to make it through. Caution flag's going to come out. Paulo Ward hits the wall. Josef Newgarden has taken the lead of the Indianapolis 500 with just 2 turns to go. Marcus Erickson on his heels. Newgarden into turn number 4.
Erickson looks to the inside, looks to the outside. Newgarden has a 2-car length lead.
Advance Auto Park twin checkered flag in the air. It's the battle at the start finish line, and Josef Newgarden will win the Indianapolis 500-mile race.
He shut him up. He shut them all up. Josef Newgarden has parked that car on the yard of bricks, and he's hopping out as we speak to celebrate with these race fans. Josef Newgarden has done it. Michael Young looks like he's going to go into the crowd. What a scene here in Indianapolis.
I was trying to put it off that, it's not going to define a career winning a race here, but everyone seems to want to make it a defining moment. And so for me, it's impossible to not look at it that way, and I'm elated to finally get it to work out.
Thought the emotion said it all. Parking that car right on the yard of bricks, a celebration, really like something we haven't seen. For a moment there, I thought he was going to go Elio 2.0, but Josef Newgarden into the crowd. And Jake, to me, that was maybe my favorite moment of a race that had quite everything in the final 15 laps. I think we mentioned at times over the month with Newgarden, is it the best to never have won a major? Is it Peyton Manning in 06? Is it, he's got to have this on the resume. And I think the move in front of you, and then certainly the emotion there post-race, that to me tells the whole story. And Josef Newgarden, he'll join us at 8:15, and we'll obviously ask him about it. But actions speak louder than words, and you could tell that was quite the piano he got off his back with one hell of a pass there right in front of you.
I had made the mention, Kevin, after the broadcast yesterday, or in the broadcast, I should say, but after the race, when Josef Newgarden, who began his career, coming actually to the Indianapolis area a lot to run go-karts. I remember the first time I heard his name, and it was actually Arnie Schrieben, who works for IndyCar, said, wait until you see this kid, Josef Newgarden, that's going to be in Indy Lights this year. And I'm like, who is that? Because usually you hear about guys as they come up. And he ran in Indy Lights, which for those that are unfamiliar, it's now known as Indy Next. And it's the final step in the ladder series in the road to Indy. And in the year that he was doing Indy Lights, he only did it for one season. I was the post-race interviewer for the broadcast of those races. And I feel like I became buddies with him because I literally interviewed him 7 times or something because he won so many races. And I remember when he won the Freedom 100, which, by the way, he is the only driver to win the Freedom 100 and the Indianapolis 500. But I remember when he won the Freedom 100, and I said to him, it's not supposed to be easy here, right? And he laughed and said, yeah, well, the car was great or whatever. And it's ironic because the Indy 500 was the one that eluded him. He wins it in his 12th start. I believe that ties Sam Hanks for the most starts. Hanks is either 12 or 13. But that was his white whale. That was the last thing left on the resume of Josef Newgarden. And I hope, although I understand, and we'll talk to him coming up, by the way, in a little over an hour. I don't know, Kevin, whether or not, and I'll be curious your guys' perspective on this. Do you feel like there is I'm not going to say an asterisk, I can never say that word, to it, but is there pause to it because of the condition or the way in which he won the race?
Yeah, obviously it's a huge storyline. The amount of red flags, when the last one was thrown. Jake, I think you just inevitably have people ask the question, who was in second place when the red flag was thrown and who owns the Indianapolis Motor Speedway? I mean, that is a question that I certainly heard post-race yesterday. But I would think, and I'm sure, and I don't know if this is maybe the most ringing endorsement, but I think for 80-90% of the people in attendance yesterday, they wanted to see one more restart. That doesn't mean that it was necessarily by the letter of the law, and I think the rule book, and you can probably speak to it better, Jake, I think there's probably a whole lot of gray area when it comes to when to throw the red flag and when not to. So I don't know if you need to have, more crystal clear definitions on that, more black and white. But I think for where you're at as a series, the goal with this race, I think an entertainment value is what should be the ultimate decision maker. And if I was Marcus Erickson and Chip Ganassi, I'd probably think the exact opposite of that. So I could be totally wrong, and there's probably, again, a 10%, 20% section of diehard IndyCar fans that listen nonstop and watch every single race that say, Kevin, that is the dumbest comment in the world. Cold tires, all hell could have broken loose. Marcus Erickson should have won that race. But I think for the vast majority of people in the building yesterday, one more restart, give your product that. Now have one of the more iconic moments really in Indy 500 history. I'm totally good with it.
Well, the other thing, if you have a problem with the red flag, then, need I remind you that the red flag prior to that, when Pato hit the wall, there's some, and I will, not that anybody cares, and this is totally anecdotal to the race itself, but from a selfishly personal standpoint, when Pato hit the wall, I will admit and apologize to everybody that I think I completely butchered that call, because Pato and Erickson were side by side going into the turn, and then I saw Pato spin and hit the wall and was so focused on the fact that here was a race contender that was knocked, and I thought probably the guy that was going to win the race.
I would agree.
That fell out of the race, and I was so focused on addressing the fact the caution was going to come out and that his day was done, that all of a sudden I see two more cars get collected. And I'm like, holy cow, who was that? And I couldn't tell who it was, and I didn't want to misidentify them, but I didn't identify them. So I didn't say who the cars were, and so in my capacity there, I failed people listening and apologize for that. But at that point, Kevin, Josef Newgarden was in the lead. And that was an accident that would have been a 5-lap caution flag. So if you don't red flag it right there, Josef Newgarden wins the race. So by red flagging it right there, Josef Newgarden's win would have been, quote, taken from him. You know what I mean? If he hadn't won. So it kind of, what I'm getting at is the racing gods kind of balanced it out in the end.
And then the next red flag, Jake, you would have people upset that Erickson passed Newgarden right before the start-finish line, which technically he's allowed to do, but we would have been debating that today.
Correct.
Should you be allowed to pass once the green flag comes out in turn 4? I mean, now passes on restarts happen before the start-finish line.
Right.
We would have been debating something else associated with the red flag.
The one thing that I would say, I understand why this criticism is out there, and I don't think it's an entirely unfair one. For a series whose fan base has pushed its chest out for a long time of not having contrived or orchestrated finishes, and for a series that did not typically see the red flag at the end of Indianapolis 500s, to have it happen in back-to-back years, I can understand why it would give people pause that they are becoming too reliant on it.
Yeah, and that's one way to look at it, and maybe I'm glass half full with it, but I would look at it the other way and go back and watch Marcus Erickson versus Pato Award last year and watch Erickson and Newgarden yesterday, and you've created some pretty darn iconic moments that I would think the common race fan looks at that, or the common sports fan, and said, holy wow, that was awesome.
That was close. Look,
it's a
holiday.
That was absolutely awesome. Obviously, a ton to get to on that front today. Kevin Bowen, Jake Query, and Mark Dykton. Just us today from a local standpoint on these airwaves. Josef Newgarden, 8:15. The president of Team Penske, Tim Cindric. That's a Pike High School grad, right? Tim Cindric?
Correct.
He joins us at 8:30. Mark, Doug Boles at some time?
Yeah, I'm still trying to confirm.
Okay, we'll have Doug Boles at some point. Before we get any further, as Jake said, it is a holiday. It is Memorial Day. Certainly the pre-race festivities, per usual, spoke for itself yesterday on that front. So thank you to everybody out there that has made the ultimate sacrifice and for giving us the opportunity to attend yesterday's race, to do this show. Certainly we know that freedom is not free, so thinking about everybody here on Memorial Day from a veteran standpoint and those that have served in the military and that have lost their lives for us. I did think, Jake, probably the coolest part for me pre-race was the back home again Indiana flyover. I at one point, and I'm sitting like at the end of the straightaway into one, I thought one of those planes was going to hit the pagoda. It was so low. So low. Unbelievable. You got the three planes coming from downtown, and I guess, what would you say, kind of bisecting the track in two, if you will. We're used to the flyover just coming out of, turn 4 and right down the front straight.
Correct.
But now, I think it's a couple years in a row that they've done this, where they have done the back home again in Indiana into the flyover. That was awesome. And I thought Jewel was very impressive for the national anthem.
You know, people were critiquing Jewel in the anthem. I saw a lot of people that were like, this was a disgrace to the anthem because...
Really?
And I'm like, what? I
thought she did a nice
Francis
job.
Scott Key's rolling in his grave, and I'm like, I thought it was really well done. Now, the only thing I will say to critique Jewel, I saw someone else point this out. I did not notice it as it happened. Aren't you supposed to take your hat off during the national anthem?
Oh, did she have one of the big hats on now that I think about it?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Please rise and remove your hats as we,
Who decides the red flag, Jake? Who's in that room?
Race control.
And those are IndyCar employees, a handful of them, and they all vote? I mean,
Max Pappas, I believe, is...
Former driver?
I should have asked Dave first who the actual race control is. I think Lyondike may be in there, too. But, yes, that's who...
So they sit in a room and they say what?
That's a good question. I mean, I don't know I don't know if there is a particular criteria.
And should there be a criteria?
Oh, I think there is.
It just seems like there's a whole lot of gray area in deciding, like, do we get that at Detroit this weekend, Jake? If a similar thing happens with one to go? Do we get that at, insert race number 6 on the IndyCar schedule here?
That's a good question. I mean, that's a really good question. I think...
Marcus Erickson is pretty upset. We'll play the audio here in a little bit. It seemed like kind of mixed from the drivers on whether or not it should have gone to a red flag there late. I think what Erickson was upset about was when they came out of the pits post-red flag, it was immediate to the green and felt like from a cold tire standpoint, that could have ended pretty poorly.
Okay, who gets your award for... And by the way, we have Newgarden was also the biggest mover.
I know, yeah. He clipped Kyle Milot by 1, right?
So
yes, we've got Nick, and Nick takes home both of them.
That's right.
2 of the 3, and then Catherine Legg first out. Is that right?
Yeah. We gave away Catherine Legg on Carb Day, I think, right?
Casey.
Now,
Casey and Nick. Nick, you got 2 gift cards coming. You're going to be at Jay's Lobsters for the next year.
So I always say this: who is the driver? Remember I told you on Carb Day there are always 3 categories. Somebody you think is going to be a contender and just it turns out their car just doesn't cooperate and they are chasing it all day. That would be who?
Honestly, after the first stint, I was ready to say Scott Dixon.
Yep.
But in typical Dixon fashion, he gets it done. What about Will Power?
He absolutely is one of them. Finished 23rd. Was running towards the front, along with Newgarden. He and Newgarden got towards the front.
And I'd say the 2 old guys, Jake. I don't know if we heard their names at all.
You talking about Castroneves and Kanaan or Castroneves, Kanaan and Marco?
Well, yeah, but and again, I don't know how much fanfare Marco had coming into Sunday. Kanaan and Castroneves, right? 15th and 16th?
Yeah. Yeah, Kanaan was running up there for a while, like in the 8 to 10 range, and all of a sudden he kind of slid. All right, how about
Connor Daly was a quiet 8th finish. I didn't hear his name.
Last year he got 6th. Connor Daly continues to kind of build here.
How about Devlin DeFrancesco?
Where did he end up?
13th.
Yeah, I thought him and Ilott were probably the two, like... I mean, at one point, didn't it look like Ilott might not make the race?
Yeah. Correct.
I was thinking about this, too, watching... Was that the longest start to a race longest start to a 500 without a yellow?
A couple years ago, we won 150 laps.
150?
Mm-hmm. And you could thank Nick Yeoman. Nick Yeoman on the intercom asked that question, and then like 20 laps later, there was a caution.
It's a 90-something yesterday. Lap 90-ish.
Like you with rain.
Hey.
You don't mention it.
How great was that weather? I mentioned it all last week. No issue whatsoever. I didn't feel a drop. The only drop you feel is from people sitting above you. The ice drops on top.
So
of your
how
head.
was your race day experience?
It was great. It was it was the first time we sat in one. So basically, you get a great view, Jake, of all of 1 into 2. So we saw, pretty much Rosenquist lose it, and then Kirkwood, upside down. And I know it's cliche, and you hear it on every telecast, but Jake, it is still amazing how quickly that AMR safety team can get to these drivers. They got to Kyle Kirkwood in 12 seconds, it seemed like. And of course, the bouncing tire. We'll talk to Doug Boles about that here. In between the suites and that turn 2 grandstand, is that right? So in the golf course parking lot?
And
and that could have been really horrific.
The one, I mean, thank goodness it was there, right? The area, and it hit a light pole, and I think someone's car.
Yeah,
and those tires are tethered. I mean, the odds. I'm not trying to carry water for IndyCar or whatever else, because it was a terribly frightening scene. But the odds of that happening, I mean, the tires are tethered, so they're made to stay within the car. Obviously, with a certain amount of force, that's going to go out the window. But I've been to 38 Indianapolis 500s. I have seen a tire go into the stands that would be into the stands once. That was in 1987. I didn't see it, but I mean, I was at the race when that happened. I've done 230 automobile races, play-by-play, something like that, and I've never seen that. I mean, that was like the flukiest of fluke, but thank goodness no one was hurt, obviously.
Yeah.
Including the drivers and the spectators and the officials or whatever else. I mean, that was, I don't know what they end up doing with the tire. Does the gal get to keep the tire?
I thought I saw that Doug Boles got her a ride home.
So imagine him going out like, what a race. What the hell happened to my car?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we can laugh about it now, right?
Sure. I mean, Rosenquist, I thought Jake had a great car for long stretches.
He did, man.
And then, he goes out there, the Pato Award incident happens right in front of you. When you watch that Pato Award move, I know it's not the same part of the racetrack, but it had a little bit of Takuma Sato, Dario Franchitti feel to it. The guy making the pass on the inside.
Totally.
Kind of deep into a turn. But it was a great race. I mean, again, weather was perfect. I really liked the vantage point from where we were sitting. You could see some pit action. So we had a pretty good view of VK into Palou. And by the way, another guy that I thought we're going to look back on in 5 years and be like, oh, Alex Palou got, what did he end up? Was it 4th?
Yep.
And, you forgot he got hit in...
Yeah, he had to come back in and get a new nose and the whole
pits,
deal, right?
Yeah. So, I mean, a hell of a ride for him, even though, we're not going to look back on it and necessarily.
Well, clearly he had a great
it.
car, right? I mean, to do that.
Yeah. But yeah, it was great. How about you?
I think it shows you, by the way, how long a 500-mile race is, that you can have two guys that happens to that both climb all the way back. Because, I mean, they were done at that point, right?
Yeah.
I thought a couple of things here. First, I'd like to know, you know how I am, Kevin, I like to do my surveys in the when we do.
Sure.
The last holiday that we did a show, I can't remember when it was, but I think people know my cell phone number, right?
Do a St. Patrick's Day show?
Yeah, but I mean where we were the only ones in here. My cell phone number, 523-9288. That's obviously a 317 area code. 523-9288. I want a roll call of people that are listening. Because I was surprised. There was a little bit of traffic coming into work. And I was surprised by that. I figured there would be nobody on the road. So I'd like to know if you're actually up and listening this morning, which we greatly appreciate if you are. And if you're working or if you just simply are up to listen to the post-race analysis and coverage, which is...
Go to get Gatorade because you're hungover.
That is also possible.
I would think the podcast would be pretty popular today. Don't you think that?
Yeah, that's probably a safer assumption. So my race experience on the day, I had, Kevin, an absolutely spectacular weekend with my friend Michael from Australia and his friends. It was like, I mean, they were just the most fun-loving, full of life.
Those dudes are cool.
Appreciative. They were so awesome. They made friends everywhere we went. They had so much fun. My mom went to the parade with us, and they absolutely soaked in the parade. I was worried that they were going to think the parade, like, what are we doing here? They loved the parade. They had so much fun. They were taking pictures. They were clapping for everybody. They were cheering. You know, the high school bands would come by, and they're standing up and cheering for them and, you know, telling them great job. And
did they try to climb on the potato?
They were actually asking if the potato was real. Will Power, and thank you to Christy, who delivered the Australian flag for them. And Christy, I went and picked up the Australian flag for them, and then they had it at the parade. And when Will Power came by, he was in the opposite lane of where we were sitting at the parade, Power saw the Australian flag and jumped off of his car while it was still moving and ran over and hugged them all and high-fived them. It was awesome. So yesterday we did do a police escort, and I'm very, very grateful to Speedway Police and the IMPD for doing it. It makes things so much easier. But I will say, I've never had that happen before where you get the escort. And I mean, you know, beggars can't be choosers, right? But we got to 16th Street, and it gridlocked, and it took like 45 minutes to get in. And I've never had that happen, which is fine. I mean, don't get me wrong. But apparently 16th Street yesterday, somebody else, a police officer told me, they go, 16th Street is the biggest mess I've ever seen. And I think it's because 30th is closed. So which
right
way,
there by Coffin Golf Course.
Yeah, what way did you get in?
We came in off 10th. 10th into Speedway. And it wasn't,
I guess if you're sitting in turn one, that's pretty good, right?
Yeah. I mean, again, driving home, I thought was very similar to last year. And part of me sits there, Jake, and says, okay, I mean, it's the second biggest crowd in the last 25 years. Should we just expect this? Like, I'm not going to pretend to be like, yeah, I'm going to sit in on these traffic meetings and I'm going to come up with a great idea. And all of a sudden they're going to look at Kevin Bowe and be like, why haven't we thought of that? You know, I know a lot of people are obviously frustrated by it. And we'll talk to Doug Boles about that. I didn't venture, to concession stands. Obviously, I had everything pretty much cooler-wise, but I didn't think the bathroom lines and looking around, I didn't think the concession stands were too long of lines. And obviously, turn one is a very populated area from a fan standpoint. So I thought outside of a little bit of traffic, which, again, I mean, welcome to the second biggest city in the state of Indiana. I didn't think it was too big of an issue.
I want to thank, you know who you are. Those of you in the Northeast Vista, the one time that I had to sprint down to go use the restroom and the line was wrapped around the restroom building, and the guys up front that immediately recognized what was going on.
They carried you to the trough?
Pretty much. I mean, they clear out and they're like, they get it, right? And they're like, they just clear out and they're like, go, just go, just find a spot. And they're kind of, then it becomes pressure packed to, perform because they're
easy now.
Somebody yelling, do it!
Yeah.
Do it!
Mark Dykton, was this your first?
This was my first
500 experience?
Yes. First carb day, first 500. I loved it. I somehow, I'm assuming I had the luck of the draw. I somehow avoided traffic both in and out of the stadium. I got
And walk us through times, because I think you were a little bit later than most.
I left my house at 10:40, and I was walking into the track at 11:20.
That's pretty wild. And you live?
In Brownsburg. And then I left, and granted, I did leave before the race ended. I left at lap 118, which is before all the cautions and red flags pretty much came out. And I was home at my house listening on the radio at 20 minutes later.
You didn't shut these blinds.
I'm sorry.
I'm getting.
Where's
blasted.
one of the guys from the trough that could have assisted you with that?
Josef Newgarden led 5 laps. That is the third fewest of any winner in the history of the Indianapolis 500.
Can I guess 1 and 2?
I believe you're going to get this pretty easily, right?
Dan Weldon,
Is Jake clapping for himself?
Joe Dawson. Is that right?
The first American since Alexander Rossi, of course, in 2016. 14 drivers led at least one lap yesterday. That ties the second highest total.
Here's both of you guys with the Rossi pick yesterday.
Excuse me?
You heard me. You heard me.
Did you not look at the fan website?
I see Alexander Rossi wins the 107.
That was taped on. That was taped on Friday before Carb Day, right?
I believe you said that you were going with Rossi, but just to be different from me, you went with
that was taped
Newgarden.
on Thursday before Carb Day, correct?
I don't know.
Yes, it was. It was recorded Thursday before Carb Day. After Carb Day, and I said, did I not say on the radio on Carb Day, look, I think Rossi's got a really good chance, but after seeing Carb Day, and because Kevin picked Rossi, which I didn't think was a bad pick, I for the sake of having more than one offer for this show, I believe Newgarden is going to win the race. Did I not say that, Kevin?
The audio does not lie.
Right. So play the audio of me saying that.
I see Alexander Rossi wins the 107.
Or how about when they asked all of our predictions on Friday officially for the website, who did I say?
Well, I was asked, and I said, Kevin and Jake both picked Rossi. So you must have said, hey, actually, I changed it to Josef Newgarden.
A third time in the history of the race, we had a pass for the lead on the final lap. Of course, Sam Hornish in 2006 and Dan Weldon there with J.R. Hildebrand. It was the 4th closest finish ever, 92 to 2014, 2006. Jake, you think we pulled the 33 drivers?
82's not up there?
I believe 92, 2014, 2006. Those are the 3
okay.
closer finishes. 0.974 for the margin between Newgarden and Erickson. We pulled the 33 drivers. They say correct move with the red flag. How many say yes?
Okay. Are they being anonymously pulled?
Sure.
$32 say no. Because any of them is going to think to themselves, what would happen? Although I shouldn't say that. It depends on whether they think of themselves as being in Erickson or Newgarden's position.
I think you certainly had guys on both sides of the fence post-race yesterday, but I think you even had like a Tony Kanaan mention, there's an element of you're trying to create the best finishes possible. And I also think this, a lot of people, it's contrived. That was, stupid. That you're losing the integrity of the race, all of that. Jake, I also think there's an element of you've got to put yourself in a position to benefit like that. Josef Newgarden, over the course of 490 some miles, put himself in a position to, if a red flag was needed, he would be in the mix.
And again, I go back to, Kevin, if the second to last red flag doesn't happen, when Pato hits the wall, if they finish in so people that are saying, and I'm saying this to be devil's advocate to an extent, but people that are saying, well, in the old days, when somebody hits the wall, the caution comes out, and you just finish under caution like Dario did 3 times.
Yeah, Kanaan in 13.
In that scenario, Josef Newgarden's your winner. Because when Pato hit the wall,
that would have been very close to cleaning it up in time.
What's that?
That would have been very close to cleaning it up in time.
Yeah, I don't think they would have gotten it done because, they had to...
Because you had 2 other cars.
Yeah, and they had to check the safer barrier and everything else. He would have won the race under caution. You're right. It probably would have been 3 or 4, maybe a 1-lap shootout, but it would have been real close.
Again, you got to put yourself in that position to be able to even benefit from the good luck. And Josef Newgarden, Santino Ferrucci...
How about this, though?
Very impressive for him in third place. Those guys, obviously, over the course of 190-some laps, they did their job to try and have a chance at the end.
I know we're up against it on a break, but, Mark, what the hell? It's a holiday, right?
Yeah, well, what is going on?
So, how about this, Kevin? A few races does not a career make. I get that. You've seen the TV show The Wire, right?
Yes.
The thing that I thought was so brilliant about The Wire was each character, they had the season that was about the kids in the public schools. And then you realize that the main adult characters of the show, by the time the show is over, you can already see the pattern of which young character was going to grow up to basically become the adult, replace the changing of the guard with the adult characters. You have drivers in the Indianapolis 500 that are in the twilight of their career. Elio Castroneves, Tony Kanaan, Scott Dixon. I'm not saying those guys are all done right now, but they're towards the end of their career. And you can start to see who may be replacing them. Did Santino Ferrucci is he going to replace Castroneves as the young, excitable fan favorite? Everybody loves him, constantly fun, always in a good mood guy? Is Marcus Erickson, is Pato O'Ward going to be the next Tony Kanaan? Knocks on the door, loves the event. Everybody wants to see him win and anticipates he's going to win and is in contention for like the first 10 years of his career and then finally breaks through. And is Marcus Erickson the next Scott Dixon? I don't mean in terms of totality of wins in the series, but at Indianapolis. Steady Eddie, not Mr. Excitement, but at the end of the race you go, holy cow, man, that guy's got a good car and he has just been hanging around and here he goes. And it's impressive. I mean, that guy yesterday, at the end of the race, you could make the argument that Marcus Erickson, he or Newgarden put themselves in position there where it's like, he's just hanging around and then knew when to make the move.
Again, Josef Newgarden starting 17th yesterday. 17th. He was the biggest mover. It's the furthest back anyone has started with a win since Ryan Hunter-Reay in 2014. Newgarden 8:15. The team president of Penske, that is Tim Cindric at 8:30. Doug Boles going to join us at some point as well. Kevin Aquare here on Memorial Day Monday, 93.5, 107.5 The Fan.
Place to go get started just like I did.
The Morning Checkdown. On 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan.
Josef Newgarden gets it done in quite the climactic finish yesterday for the 107th running of the Indianapolis 500. The emotions said it all for Newgarden post-race, parking that car right on the yard of bricks. I didn't even know there was a little area that he could get into the crowd over there.
I'm curious. I'm going to ask him how he even knew about that. I had no idea that was there.
Secret entrance, Josef Newgarden into the crowd. Here was the Tennessean yesterday on the emotions of winning his first Indianapolis 500.
Oh, just pure emotion. I was trying to stay locked in. I was emotional the whole last 10 laps because I knew we were in a position to fight for this win at the end, and I knew it wasn't going to be easy. It was going to come to some last lap shootout like it always is these days, which is exciting but stressful for us. But just been thinking about all the work. I can't talk highly enough about the team. They've worked so hard all month. It's so long to get to this point. We're here for weeks working and grinding on this thing just for this one moment, and that's what makes it so demoralizing when it doesn't work out. I can tell you, we're going to enjoy it tonight. It's going to be amazing to win this.
Josef Newgarden joined us at 8:15, maybe slightly hungover based off those comments. The runner-up was Marcus Erickson. On the flip side of it, the restart, of course, did not go his way as Newgarden passed Erickson in that really right in front of Jake in turn 3. What did Marcus Erickson think about that final red flag?
I just thought it was unfair and dangerous end to the race. I don't think it was enough laps to do what we did. I think we've never done a restart out of the pits, and we don't get the tires up to temperature. And I think we did everything right today. I'm very proud of the number 8 crew and everyone in Chip Ganassi Racing. I think I did everything right behind the wheel. I did an awesome last restart. I think I caught Josef completely off guard and got the gap and kept the lead into turn 1, which no one else had done all day. But, I just couldn't hold it on the back. I was flat, but I couldn't hold it. So, I'm proud of us. Congratulations to Josef. He did everything right as well. So, he's a worthy champion, but I'm just very disappointed with the way that ended. I don't think that was fair.
I think he's right on all accounts there. It sucks for him the way it ended. It was going to go one of two ways. With that kind of a finish, when it comes down to a one-lap shootout like that, one guy's going to be really happy and the other one's going to be really disappointed. I mean, it's kind of how it goes, right?
A couple of big names to get to just in where they finished. Graham Rahal, just an unfortunate start to his, obviously, a wild month. Start yesterday with the battery not working for him. 22nd, Marco Andretti 17th, Elio 16th, Tony Kanaan 15th. You saw Ed Carpenter with a penalty there somewhat late. He was involved. I think Benjamin Peterson, if I'm not mistaken, was that accident there late. 20th place. Jake, anybody else kind of stand out to you? Santino Ferrucci in 3rd, commended certainly.
Yeah, a couple of here are the ones that jumped out. Ferrucci in 3rd, I witnessed the crowd going bonkers for Ferrucci. It reminded me of
I thought he got some of the
Kanaan.
loudest cheers.
He did. Rossi, I thought, was really good. And I thought, towards the end, I thought Rossi was going to make a move because if they would have had a couple of laps to, under green, as opposed to it being fractured by those flags, Rossi would have been interesting because if they cleaned up the outside line, what a shock. He was going to go there, right? I'm just looking down the whole list here, so bear with me.
Obviously, Pato Ward and Felix Rosenquist, great, cars all day long. And
Sato was steady but not aggressive to get that top 10, right? Kudos to Jack Harvey for finishing 18th. I didn't say his name all day, but started in the back, barely made the field, finished 18th. And one driver that I'm going to tip my cap to, and people are probably going to laugh at it. When it was announced that there were going to be 34 cars in the race, everyone just assumed it was a foregone conclusion that R.C. Enerson would not make the show. And he not only made the race, at one point R.C. Enerson was holding on to his lead lap, and he had the leaders behind him, and he was running at the same pace. He wasn't by any stretch of the imagination being difficult, but he was holding his line, and he was running at good pace. The car ended up conking out, but I thought R.C. Enerson, for somebody that a lot of people thought wouldn't even make the race, showed himself to be a fine driver in the race itself. I thought he did a nice job.
I don't think the top 10 offered a single surprise. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, that's an accurate statement.
Josef Newgarden, Marcus Erickson, Santino Ferrucci, Palou, and Rossi. That's your first 5. 6 through 10, Scott Dixon, Takuma Sato, Connor Daly, Colton Herta, and Rinus VeeKay. Tonight, we do get 2 of the best words, certainly in sports. That is a Game 7. Boy, literally the eyes were starting to go up and down on Saturday night. I guess it was Saturday night, right? I'm like, am I going to be able to stay up for this Game 6? How about Derek White's tip in there to keep Boston's season alive? I don't think it's hyperbole to say, and again, what happens the rest of the way will probably influence this. That's one of the greatest plays in NBA history.
I saw somebody say, would Brad Stevens trade that shot for Gordon Hayward's going down?
Oh, I think you would take the Hayward, right?
No question. Well, one's for a title and the other's just to keep your season alive. You know what I mean?
They get it done tonight. 7.5 point favorite, Boston.
Jaylen Brown said, don't let us win one. Unbelievable. Here they are.
First time in NBA history you've ever had a home team down 3-0 force a Game 7 on their home floor. We'll see if they can complete it tonight. It's just a wild finish in Game 6 on Saturday night. All right, the rest of the show looks like this. We'll certainly focus a whole lot on the 107th running of the Indianapolis 500. Josef Newgarden, 8:15. Tim Cindric, the president of Team Penske, at 8:30. And, Mark, we've got Doug Boles at 9:30?
9:30, correct.
I'm a little confused on why Shaq wasn't there. Like, didn't we think, wasn't there a good chance the whole time that the Eastern Conference Finals could have gone 6 games?
I kind of wondered the same about that. I'm like, this didn't sneak up on people, right?
Like, if you were to say before the start of the Eastern Conference Finals, hey, will this series go 6? I'd probably say, yeah, 50-50 chance. Maybe better than 50-50.
Totally agree.
That was odd to me.
And Game 7 wasn't until tonight, so couldn't he have taken like a private jet from Miami to Indy and then a private jet from Indy to Miami? Or back to Boston?
Maybe commercial airlines, a little expensive for Shaq
on
around
Southwest, I'm sure
Memorial Day weekend. Yeah.
It didn't appear as though the people in the snake pit missed him. I don't mean that as a slight at him. I'm saying, like, the show went on and it was packed. I could feel the and like the fire. I'm telling you, that crowd yesterday, I took a video of it. There wasn't a single, I'm not kidding you. At the start of that race, I looked, I didn't see a gap anywhere.
It was less than 5,000 grandstand seats available on Friday. You would have to think that number shrinked big time over the course of the weekend. You would think they got some good walk-up tickets.
I was sitting there anxiously awaiting to find out who the Titans' next draft pick was going to be.
No, God.
I had a feeling there was an NFL draft joke there somewhere.
Kevin Aquari on the other side.
No, let me just say this, and then I'm done, and then I'm off my soapbox for at least 5 minutes.
We are way over.
It's a holiday. Can you honestly tell me, can either one of you honestly look me in the eye after being at that crowd yesterday now that it's tangibly in front of us, the point that I've been trying to make forever, can you honestly tell me when you looked around that crowd was 60% what was at the NFL draft?
Josef Newgarden coming up in 30 here. Kevin Aquari on a Monday.
No further questions.
to Kevin and Query on 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan.
Jack, I think one of the things I've always really respected about Josef Newgarden is, and feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, I've never gotten the feeling that he is flirted with the idea of leaving IndyCar. I always feel like from a public standpoint, he's kind of been, hey, I'm in this for the long haul here. And I think from a what winner would benefit the series the most moving forward, I think I said Pato Award last week. I would have probably put Newgarden second on that list.
Yeah, I would agree. You know, this is a kind of an uncomfortable thing to say. Well, it's not uncomfortable. Hell, I don't care. But other people might find it uncomfortable.
I think performing in the trough might have been a little bit more uncomfortable than what you're about to say.
Again, I mean, I've known Newgarden since he really was a kid. He is just a very, very, like, I mean, he's a nice looking, he is like the wholesome, all-American, handsome, chiseled looking guy. Like, he is literally what you would sculpt. Like, if you were doing a movie, like a Pixar movie about IndyCar drivers, and you had to pick, like, the American hero, isn't that how you would exactly mold the look of the, like, he looks like Max Headroom. I mean, he literally, I look at him and I go, this guy's really personable. He's very smart. He drives for the best team. He wins the Indy 500. Like, if there's not a guy that is going to become the face of a sport that helps carry it to the next level in this country, if it's not him, who's it going to be? If it doesn't latch on with him, who's it going to latch on with?
This is kind of wild. Last year, Maddie and I went out for a drink after quals and ran into him, Newgarden, and he was pretty mad about his qualifying last year for the 500. If I remember correctly, he kind of got a late draw, didn't make the fast 12. You know, Penske's had issues. I mean, hell, they had issues in qualifying this year with Will Power being the only one in the first 4 rows, and that was the outside of row 4. And so, you know, Maddie was like, should I go? I would like to go say something to him. You know, I follow him on Instagram. I'm like, oh, geez. So I'm like, all right, fine. Go ahead and say something to him. And I felt like, this is based off Maddie's interaction with him. Maddie came back and was like, he was really nice, but she also, like, asked him, like, oh, you know, sorry that your day didn't go too well. And Maddie's like, I could feel his anger about that. Like, I could feel how passionate he was that he potentially just let another 500 kind of go without winning it. But at the same time, in that moment, you know, and again, this is 2-3 hours after his qualifying attempt, he still had the wherewithal to say, you know, all right, here's some 30-year-old woman, and I'm going to make, you know, have the time of day to talk to her. You know, it's not like Maddie asked her for a picture, but I just feel like Newgarden has a really great grasp of it, of like, clearly he is a super passionate individual about racing and all of that, and he knows the elephant in the room that he just got off his back yesterday, but he also knows that he is on the front of every IMS and IndyCar program in terms of, this is our poster child, and we need to make sure that that guy realizes it. And I think it's really difficult to kind of achieve that grasp, and I think he still has a crazy amount of drive, but also when needed, he can, you know, kind of turn it on.
I think that first off, Josef Newgarden has told me before that he considers himself an introvert, which I think is fascinating because he's got a great personality.
You would never know that. Watch him in interviews or anything.
Totally. When Newgarden first signed with Ed Carpenter, and at that time it was Sarah Fisher Hartman Racing. It was Sarah Fisher Hartman Racing, and that was kind of in coordination with Ed Carpenter, and then it was Carpenter Fisher Hartman Racing. And that obviously just became Ed Carpenter Racing. When he left Ed Carpenter Racing to go to Penske, which seemed to be a foregone conclusion, I always admired this about him. I mean, yes, he ultimately made the move, but I think he felt terrible about it. I think he was really reluctant to disappoint people. And I'll be curious to ask him how much of winning the Indy 500 finally came down to the fact that he had to worry less about disappointing other people and focus on just simply whether or not he was going to be disappointed. because I think he is a guy that wants to make sure that people are happy with what he's doing. I do think the world of him as a guy. I think he's a wonderful guy.
When you think back to a handful of years ago, Jake, he's at the peak of the sport in terms of series winner, and he's up there every year from a point standpoint, and he's winning on street courses and road courses and other ovals not named IMS. But can you imagine just naturally how he had to feel watching Will Power win in 2018, watching Simon Pagenaud win in 2019? I mean, his teammates winning the most important race.
And you got to wonder how McLaughlin will feel now, right?
Sure. And then it just started to grow about, okay, the best to have never won an Indianapolis 500. And all of a sudden he's got his 9th start and his 10th start. And yesterday was his 12th start. And that tied the most starts without an Indy 500 win. Is that right? Tony Kanaan and, was it Stan Hanks?
Well, Sam Hanks
Hanks?
Hanks was, let me see how many Hanks did. I was always wrong about that stat. Kanaan was one behind Hanks. I thought for some reason that Hanks and Kanaan were tied. Sam Hanks had the record. Sam Hanks won the Indianapolis 500 in his 13th start. So Newgarden and Kanaan both won in their 12th. So they're second.
The other thing I'm curious about, and I thought was fascinating, is, Newgarden, and the Marcus Erickson audio just kind of alluded to it a little bit earlier. Newgarden did not go for that pass on Erickson, and maybe this is because Erickson got such a great jump off that final restart. Jake, he didn't go for it down that main straight. He went for it kind of in front of you, or basically down the backstretch into 3. And then if you watch the final snake on the main straightaway, I have never seen, since the snake or the dragon, whatever you want to call it, since Pagenaud was the first, or whoever was the first that really exaggerated it. I said to Maddie and my brothers-in-law, that looked like a snake on drugs. It from our vantage point, and again, we're sitting on the end of the straightaway, start of 1. It looked like he was going straight into the pit boxes.
Right.
When he veered way below that white line. I know there are some people out there that are like, that was incredibly dangerous, like they need to change that rule, this and that. That's not necessarily the topic that I want to have today. But for a guy that has never really been up there at that place, Jake, because, Newgarden has not been in one of these final lap back and forths. Right. He's just not. 3rd was his best finish, and it wasn't even, some sort of back and forth. It's kind of crazy to imagine him, I guess trying that for the first time at that place. And why did he feel the need he had to go that low? If he would have stayed, in a, just kind of try to kind of kiss that attenuator and not, obviously not hit it, but try to get as close as possible, does he think Erickson would have passed him?
That's a good question. I mean, the air. I mean, these guys have figured out the aerodynamics of disrupting the air, and that's an area that Alex Palou. If Alex Palou had not gone through what he did 2 years ago with Castroneves, I don't know that Alex Palou finishes in the top 5 this year. But I think he learned the aerodynamics of traffic and manipulating air and when to pass and those kinds of things, right? I mean, you're always learning.
Yeah, I would love to see an overhead of that final lap and the line that Newgarden took and the line that Erickson
took. Like one
took.
of those invisible things? Yeah.
Because Newgarden didn't take the full snake bait. And then once he got the lead, Erickson did take it. So I'd love for, maybe Josef to explain a little bit more with that. He joins us in 15. Tim Cindric, the team president of Team Penske, in 30, and Doug Boles coming up in the 9 o'clock hour. Kevin Aquari here, recapping the 107th running of the Indy 500.
On 93.5 and 107.5, The Fan.
Drivers, start your engines.
Fans on their feet, and the green flag flies on the 2023 Indianapolis 500 into turn number 1.
We've got trouble, guys, here at pit exit. We saw Rinus VK got sideways trying to peel out of his box, and Markey T-boned the pole sitter, Alex Palou. Who's the third line? And it looks like Rosenquist just tagged the wall, Michael. He's into the wall. Felix Rosenquist spins. He'll slide back into traffic. He'll clip Kyle Kirkwood. Kirkwood goes upside down. Kirkwood slides around the outside retaining wall. Felix Rosenquist car at the exit of turn number 2. Oh, my goodness, what a horrible crash.
Ward's going to go to the bottom of the racetrack side by side with Marcus Erickson. For second, Ward's not going to make it through. Caution flag's going to come out. Pato Ward hits the wall. Josef Newgarden has taken the lead of the Indianapolis 500 with just 2 turns to go. Marcus Erickson on his heels. Newgarden into turn number 4.
Erickson looks to the inside, looks to the outside. Newgarden has a 2-car length lead.
Advance Auto Park twin checkered flag in the air. It's a battle at the start-finish line, and Josef Newgarden will win the Indianapolis 500-mile race.
He shut him up. He shut them all up. Josef Newgarden has parked that car on the yard of bricks, and he's hopping out as we speak to celebrate with these race fans. Josef Newgarden has done it. Michael Young looks like he's going to go into the crowd. What a scene here in Indianapolis.
I was trying to put it off that, it's not going to define a career winning a race here, but everyone seems to want to make it a defining moment. And so for me, it's impossible to not look at it that way. And I'm elated to finally get it to work out.
Josef Newgarden led just 5 laps yesterday, the third fewest for a winner, but obviously he led the most important one with one hell of a push there on that 200th and final lap. Good Monday morning to you. We've been talking about it here all Monday long. Kevin Bowen, Jake Query, and Mark Dykton. Josef Newgarden join us here in a few minutes. Tim Cindric, he is the strategist, right, for Newgarden?
Correct.
He's going to join us coming up.
President of Team Penske, and he also is in the pit box with Newgarden.
8:30, the Pike High School product. And then Doug Boles coming up at 9 o'clock. Jake, it was one of those races where relatively smooth through the first 90, 100 laps. I thought it was kind of a rather jumbled group as well. Like, I didn't feel like we got any, and obviously yellows can lead to some of this. I didn't think we got massive, hey, the first 10 is, 10 seconds ahead of the next 10. It seemed pretty closely compacted, and then all of a sudden there, certainly the last 15, 20 laps, whether it was the Felix Rosenquist crash, which took Kirkwood out, or the Pato Ward crash, which then Augustine Canapino and Simon Pagenaud got caught up in as well. Then all of a sudden chaos for the final 20 laps.
Yeah, the late in the race, I will admit that at times I get confused by this. It's like algebra for me, and that is like when you had that situation where you had Hunter Ray, Ilott, there was a third one I can't recall, and then you looked at the leaderboard and you had Pato was 4th, Newgarden was 5th, Erickson was 6th, and you knew that was essentially the lead. But technically, they weren't in the lead at that point.
Right.
Because you get off-sequencing pit cycles coming through, and that gets confusing to me of wait a minute, who's in the lead here, who's not? The staggered pit stops becomes confusing because then you get 2 different groups. This group that if such and such happens, they're going to be okay. This group that is legitimately the one that's been running up front. And, of course, in the end, it all balanced itself out where Group 2, which was the ones that were running up front all day, ended up towards the front. Pato, for example, pitted and came out, and I'm like, wait a minute, he's in second. I'm like, is he on the lead lap? I was confused by it. I think people don't realize that, I don't have anything up there, right? I have the Jumbotron.
But you're relying on Davey Hamilton and Mark James, just like all of us are.
And thank goodness, and by the way, esoteric inside baseball here. Rick Evans, who is our chief engineer, worked tirelessly. Endlessly. He lives in Bloomington. He drove up countless days over the winter and the spring to install new intercom systems for us in the turns where we could hear one another, to be able to talk and have conversation off air to keep each other abreast of what was going on. And Rick was the real hero yesterday, undoubtedly. But yeah, so it does get confusing. The other thing, and I can't be the only one that this happens with, Kevin, but you know the big video boards? Every once in a while, the video boards would run an ad for Pennzoil.
And I thought caution.
Oh, yeah, every time.
I know.
This huge yellow banner goes over the top with Pennzoil, and they're like, oh my gosh, caution flag.
It's like the NFL score graphic when they have like yellow on the score graphic, and I'm like, wait, is that a flag on the play?
Yeah, totally.
Could not agree more.
Totally.
On that front.
Great day, though.
Again, just the third time in history you have had a pass for the lead on the final lap. Sam Hornish in 06, Dan Weldon in 2011. It is the fourth closest finish in the history of the Indianapolis 500. 52 lead changes, the third most in the history of the race, and the first 500 ever with a red flag on 3 separate occasions, non-weather related. We've got Josef Newgarden coming up here in a few, so let's take a quick break here to make sure we've got plenty of time, because Josef Newgarden and then followed right after that with the team president from Penske. That would be Tim Cindric. So Josef Newgarden on the other side here. Kevin Aquari recapping the 107th running of the 500.
confused. I think some people were. Were you confused at the end whether or not they were on the final lap or going to the white flag?
I thought you guys did a nice job explaining that it was just going to be one flag or one lap.
Because I will admit to the fact of like, I could see how people would have been confused by that. You know what I mean?
I thought you guys, I thought you guys did a nice job in making sure that we were abreast of that.
Well, joining us now on the Payless Liquors hotline, probably still, as a matter of fact, in a fascinating, I think, maybe a good karma. In December of 2021, Josef Newgarden paid a visit to the Estes Dairy Farm. He met with Kerry Estes, who at that time was named as a rookie milk presenter for the Indianapolis 500-mile race. And then yesterday, Kerry handed him the bottle of milk, and the weight of the world came off the shoulders of Josef Newgarden. Josef, congratulations. You did it.
How cool is that? I saw Kerry there, and I've been to his farm. I met his family, and I know exactly where that milk came from. So it was very cool. It was a big deal to be a part of it. And, this year more than ever, I've just felt the appreciation to be in this race and to have an opportunity to go for it. And it was just amazing, the whole thing. It really come full circle from my side. Coming up here when I was younger with my dad to race go-karts and, trying to get into the sport, and to be here today with everybody, yesterday, I should say, with everybody it was really thrilling.
When you, Josef, it's interesting because, and I had mentioned this earlier on the show, I feel like I've known you since you were a kid, even though you were a young man, right? But but from a racing standpoint, your evolution and your maturation as a driver. When you got out of the car, what I saw was a guy that not only was soaking in the fact that he had just won the biggest race in the world, but a guy that felt like finally he could look at the 335,000 people and say, I did it. I finally did it, because everybody here had expected me, maybe even unfairly, to have done this by now. Is there an element of truth to that relief that overcame you?
I think for sure, to a degree that's accurate. The Indy 500, I think, stands alone as the hardest race in the world to win. I definitely believe that. And it is an amazing event. There's nothing like it. There's nothing that rivals it. It's, the single, it's the greatest spectacle in racing for a reason. The name is so fitting, and there's so much pressure to it. And I don't subscribe to, the 500 being a necessity to make a career. I think most people do, though. I think that's, that is the pressure you feel when you're here, that is the requirement, to have a complete career. And, I think about all the people that probably either should have or could have won the race. And, it's just not easy. This place doesn't give anything to anybody. It doesn't owe anybody anything. They don't just get handed out. You got to go earn it. And, sometimes it can be the cruelest place in the world, but it's an incredible honor to be able to win the race and to secure victory here. And, for me, it has definitely lifted a weight. Whether that weight should be there or not is a different discussion, but there's a weight to it, and it was lifted yesterday. I feel different, and maybe not for the reasons that everyone would think.
Josef, congratulations. It was an unbelievable finish, of course. I thought the celebration was maybe more incredible than what you did on the final lap. How spontaneous was the celebration? Did you know there was a gap in the fence there that all of a sudden you got the people that have been slamming beers all day?
I've been wanting to do that for years. I've not told. There's about one person in the world that knew that I wanted to do that. I've been wanting to ever since I was a rookie here in 2012. I thought it would just be incredible to go into the energy of this crowd. There's nothing like the Indy 500 crowd. It's a magical place, as we all know, and it's really it's something to behold in person. And I said if I'm lucky enough to win this race, that's what I'm doing. I want to go into the crowd. I knew exactly where that location was. I've been scouting that for years, and I couldn't wait to get down there. Everyone went quiet on the radio, which was funny. I was on the cool down lap, and I was freaking out, and I was trying to message the team and tell them where I was going, and I had no response. Everyone was gone. So, obviously I thought that was probably a good thing, but it was funny that no one was responding to me after the race.
Could you walk us through your emotions sitting there on pit lane before, I guess, the final red flag and the line that you ended up taking on lap 200? How did that play out from your vantage point and passing Marcus there on the backstretch?
Yeah, really, this race could have unfolded probably 10 different ways. I'm sure more. You just don't know what's going to happen. I mean, we didn't predict 3 red flags. We didn't even predict the first red flag. If we would have gone green to the finish before that before the first red flag, then we were sitting in a good spot. The second red flag was a bit awkward, and then the last one, as you said, it was a single lap, and I knew that this was what it was all going to be right here, and we had to put it on the line. And we were in a good spot. We really were. We were where we needed to be. First or second is where you wanted to be positioned there at the end. With 10 to go, maybe you could have still been third, but when it really got down to it, you needed to be first or second. And I didn't have anything planned. I just knew I needed to get to the lead as quickly as I could, and I didn't get him on the front straight. He actually got a really good jump, and I think that worked to my advantage. And obviously you saw the snaking that's been happening here. I guess people are calling it the dragon. But the weave that has to happen to try and break the draft is just really necessary because it's so much easier to tow up to a car than what it's been in years past. And so Marcus was trying to break the tow, and we had an amazing runoff too. And I thought we'd probably be pretty good to the line, but he had a great run back at me coming off turn 4. So I just had to be as aggressive as possible. I wasn't going to give this one up. I mean, we were in position for it. And so I was going to be as aggressive as I could off of 4, and that's what you saw me do.
Joseph, I'm sure you know, Josef Newgarden is our guest, the winner of the 107th Indy 500 on the Payless Liquors Hotline. Obviously, there has been critique, certainly from Marcus Erickson, understandably, about the decision to red flag it at the end. It worked out for you. I thought personally the racing gods kind of balanced out because I thought when Pato hit the wall, my first thought was Newgarden just won the race because it's going to go to caution here for the last 5 laps or whatever it was. And they red flagged that. And then, of course, you get another one in there. But can you and I know it worked out for you, rightly so, but can you understand or speak to the criticism that people have of doing the red flag when there's only 1 lap left?
Yeah, look, I'm just going to tell you, I think they did the right thing to throw another red. Where does it stop? That would be my question. To your point, Jake, why did we even, then you'd go back and say, why did we even throw the first one? And I get the effort these days to give us a good show to the finish. I think actually the second red flag, if we didn't get that one, that would have been the most shamed to finish under. It was such an awkward restart. We didn't even get a restart, and then it went red. And if the race ended on that one, I think that would have been more silly. So I thought it was great that they had a final lap shootout. I've got no problem with it. Obviously it worked out great for us, so we're all happy. Everybody else is leaving with a broken heart, except for one team. But that's Indianapolis, and I've lived that life 11 years before this, but I have no problem with it. If anything, I think about the numerous races. There's way more than a handful amount of races where things, I said, I wish that was different, or I felt like we didn't get luck or whatever you want to call it. And I don't think we got lucky yesterday by any means, but you know what? We didn't get any bad luck. We had no bad luck yesterday. And that was big for us to secure the win, was to not have anything go against us. So I was really thankful they did what they did. I'm glad the crowd got a great final lap. We raced to the line, and not that there's anything wrong with winning under yellow. I've won races under yellow, and I'd be happy to win here in that situation if that's what it would be. But it's definitely a little more special to win under green.
Joseph, I'd said this earlier, and it's probably overly Freudian of me, but I'm curious your thought on this, or if you've stopped to think of in this term. When you were a young guy in the series, a rookie, I remember when you started in the front row in Long Beach, and they had you doing videos, going around interviewing people, and you literally, Josef Newgarden was the guy that IndyCar knew, IndyCar radio knew, television knew, that if you needed a soundbite, if you needed a quip, if you needed any accommodation, Josef Newgarden was the guy that was going to do it. You were always accommodating. You were always gregarious. You told me that you were an introvert, which I found fascinating. But I think that you were always, and I always respected this, but I think it was really important to you to deliver to as many people as you could and do what was asked of you. And then I think your career really came to form when you finally decided that you had to focus actually on what Josef Newgarden needed as opposed to what everyone else did, which was perfectly within your right. And I think that that's when everything came together for you and you finally got your white whale at Indy. Am I overthinking it, or do you think there's some truth to that?
No, it's probably, it's very nice of you, Jake. You've been so kind to me as many have in our sport. But that's probably true to some degree. I tried to go over the top more often than not to do everything possible. I felt the pressure early in my career. I mean, I don't know how you can't, I was not here on some check, it was, I got an opportunity to, drive IndyCars when I was 20 years old. And you either keep getting that opportunity and you stick around or you don't. And you get fired, and that's the end of the career. So I just wanted to do everything I could to stay here and to keep getting an opportunity. And there's a point where that shifts, and you build some confidence, and I think you build some credit up, and people want to give you that chance more and more. But it's hard. I am an introvert, and to try and please everybody is very difficult. And even in our sport, it's difficult in any sport, and I think any facet of life, but it's very difficult in motorsports with all the demands, the fans, the partners, everything that we have. And I tried to do that, but there was a shift where I just had to pull back for a minute. I'm like, you know what? I'm not gonna please everybody, and not everybody's gonna like me, and that's okay. You just gotta kind of focus on the career side of it and what I really want to achieve, because it is so important to me. I love racing more than anything. I'm very, very competitive. So there was a shift, but I still try and do as much as I can. It's just, it got to a point where you're just not going to please everybody.
Josef, last one from me. How was the party last night?
It was good. It was great to be with the team. Tim Cindric, our president, definitely sorted out a great time, which was awesome. He's a Hoosier. He knows all about this race. He's been growing up here as a kid, and so it was cool to win one with him. I just was like, it starts to wane a little bit after being here for, I guess, I don't even know what this is. It's either my 7th or 8th year at Penske, and it's not. I started looking at my bosses with, feeling like I was a disappointment that we hadn't won it together. And so, for Tim to, be there last night and the whole team, it was really special. It was just special to be a part of it. And it's not easy, as you guys know. And it was fun. It was just fun to have that moment with everybody that really made it happen. It is a team sport, no doubt. I mean, look, it's not just about driving the car well. Everything's got to go perfectly. You got to have just a rock star crew around you, and they're the ones that get it here to race day, and they're the ones that really pushed over the line. So it was just it was special to have that camaraderie last night. It's like a feeling in a club that we were all in together that you don't realize until you actually do it.
All told, in the record books, Josef, it will go down as a win that took 2 hours, 58 minutes, and 21 seconds. That is more or less than the amount of sleep you got.
It's a close. That's a close over/under. I think it's slightly more. Unfortunately, not good.
Well, I'll tell you what. It was
well deserved.
It was well deserved, and milk does a body good when you got to replenish sometime tomorrow. But congratulations. I speak, Josef, for a lot of people that have seen it from the beginning of your career, just to see the overall joy and the relief, if you will, for you. It was well-deserved, and it's not my job to root for people, but I was happy for you because I know what it meant. So congratulations, and enjoy all that comes with it.
Well, thank you guys. Thanks for all the amazing coverage as well. Just an awesome month. So looking forward to the next one.
Congrats, Joseph.
Thanks.
It's Joseph Newgarden right there on the Payless Liquors hotline. Jake, I think you heard it in his words there. Just the amount of relief. I mean, literally, he said it right there. I felt like I was a disappointment at times to Team Penske. And we brought it up earlier when Will Power wins in 2018 and Pagenaud in 2019. And how does he not feel a little bit of the weight of the world? And how great is it that he scouted the celebration out?
That's beautiful.
How awesome is that?
That's the greatest part of the whole thing. Joining us now on the Payless Liquors hotline, the other guy that you just heard him mention, who not only is a graduate of Pike High School and is the president of
Let's go Red Devils.
Team Penske, that's right, but also a new member of the Indianapolis Motor Speedway Hall of Fame. And Tim Cindric, I'll begin with this. I found it fascinating, and I think it speaks to your team that you said yesterday that you started to feel bad for Roger Penske that it had been, a whopping 4 years since the team had won the Indianapolis 500, the 19th now for the team in general. I'm not going to ask you if that was the most satisfying of them all, but it was probably one of the harder earned of them all. Safe to say?
Yeah, without a doubt.
Let's begin with this. As a strategist, when you're sitting there and you're trying to kind of figure out the way a race is going to fall, I guess a two-part question in terms of that 2 car for Josef Newgarden. I saw him in Carb Day and thought to myself, that car looks really good in traffic. And as a result of that, I thought Newgarden had a really good chance. But at what point in the race did you start to realize that, in fact, that car was going to be able to get up where you needed to be when you needed to be there?
Actually, it was the first stint. My biggest concern was how the first stint was going to go, because actually on Carb Day, when the track was green there, the first stint that we did, we tried to do a full tank run on Carb Day, and the car created a lot of vibrations and went really loose, and we would have had to pit probably halfway through, probably lap 15 or so, which I think is exactly what you saw play out with Scott Dixon in the race yesterday. And, the fact that we could go from starting 17th to, I don't know, we were 8th or 9th or something when we came in for our first pit stop. At that point, I told him we were way ahead of schedule. From that point on, I knew once we got in that top 6 or 7 and he could actually smell the front, that then his confidence level changes completely and really made a good day of it, obviously, from that point on.
Tim, what was your message to Josef when you got word that there'd be one more final red flag?
It was as simple as that. We're going to see one lap to figure this out, during the red flags and all that, because of, the radios are public and that type of thing. And you didn't probably hear a lot from us, in terms of, what we're thinking and what information we can give him. Most of that under red flag, we're able to really relay to him, through the chief mechanic that's actually at the car. So, we're talking to him in a different channel so that he can then relay to Josef kind of what we're thinking and what we see and understand for the restart. So, it was really all on him. And I knew we'd had a conversation earlier in the week, and he said, if it comes down to it, I know what I'm going to do. And it was as simple as that. And that's all I need to know.
Were you surprised the red flag was thrown there one final time?
No, especially with the way the caution occurred the time before. Because I think when you look back at it, had it not been thrown, and at that point in time, you wouldn't know where anybody was or who the winner was. And I'm not sure how 300,000 people are going to react to, hey, let's have a video review to figure out who won this race under caution.
That's a fair point, and there was a little bit of kind of a chaos there, right, Tim? Of like, wait a minute, like where does everybody slot, etc. I'm curious from your standpoint. Yeah.
Well, he came down the final restart, or that restart. He was the leader, which you knew wasn't going to hold. But then it was a matter of, well, who is the leader and how did it all sort out? And, going into turn 1, everybody passed. Well, a couple cars passed him, and he's sitting there P4 in line, which, I knew wasn't right. I knew he was either first or second when the yellow came out, just watching it. And, they've got to sort that out and sort a few other places out. But the time that it took them to sort that out, when there was no action on the racetrack, everything was at a pause. That would have been the time that we would have all had to wait under caution to understand who the winner was and what the lineup was, and it was going to be under caution after having all those fans wait for 2 other red flags. So, no, I wasn't surprised because that was going to have to be the way it was.
Are you guys told? Tim Cindric is our guest from Team Penske. He's on the Payless Liquors hotline. Are you guys as team directors, team presidents, drivers, whatever it may be, is there a definitive rule book that going into it of what defines what would constitute a red flag within the last, let's say 5 or 10 laps of a race? Does that make sense what I'm asking, I guess? I mean, do you know pretty definitively this is going to be red because we talked about it before the race?
Well, I think it's very, open to the point where, if there's a possibility for us to go red flag and finish the race under green, we will, and we'll abandon all procedures at that point in time.
Gotcha.
So, I mean, that's as clear. I mean, it basically says, hey, we're going to do whatever we can to give them a green flag finish, and unlike NASCAR, we're not going to go to a green, white, checkered and overtime and that type of thing. We're going to finish it it's going to be a 500-mile race, and, you can be on both ends of that. I've been on both ends of that as well, and it is what it is. And, I think it's no different than when you watch a NASCAR race and green, white, checkers and all that happen. And, the one that had the race in the bag or was in a better position, sometimes isn't the one that's in the best position at the red flag situation. So, it is what it is. I don't think the fans would complain about how it all turned out, regardless of who they wanted to win. Seeing Indy finish under yellow, which we've seen many times, is a difficult thing. And, that race could have finished under yellow as well. We could have wrecked on the front straightaway, just like the previous restart, and we would have had a different winner.
Tim, the reality is that there was a time that you were a kid at Pike High School who presumably maybe plotted with the now governor of Indiana, Eric Holcomb, a day that you could cut out early to go watch practice at IMS. And here it is now. You're the president of a team for the guy that owns the Speedway, who just won the 19th Team Indianapolis 500. You're immortalized inside the museum that sits inside the facility as part of the Hall of Fame. With all of that, is there still that little part of you that's the kid from Pike Township that gets that same giddiness when he comes out of the tunnel? Or has it become a robotic and constant vision of victory and that's it? Or are you allowed to truly feel everything that you're able to do?
Oh, it never gets old. I don't know, it's pretty surreal in some ways, when you look at all the things you said, and in addition to, my relationship with the governor. Still hard to call him the governor, but anyway, I mean, there's a guy that I went spring break with, throughout high school, and played in the backyard, and as he said, rode our bicycles, traded baseball cards. I mean, just you name it. The two of us did it. We're same age, same neighborhood, and that's when you drank out of a hose, right? But no, that I don't know. For me, I couldn't have written a better script for how my life from a professional and personal perspective has really panned out. And we had the chance when Simon Pagenaud won Indy, and we were invited to the White House, and he and I are standing there in the Oval Office with President Trump, looking at each other going, what the hell are we doing here? No, it's pretty surreal, really.
Tim, we just had Josef Newgarden on with us, and I thought he was extremely candid in mentioning, I'm sure he had these conversations with you of there were times, given Team Penske's rich history, that he felt like a disappointment, that he hadn't gotten it done at the 500. And he watches Will Power in 2018. He watches Pagenaud, like you just said, the following year. When Josef had those conversations with you, what was kind of your reaction? And could you describe maybe how Josef was in those moments of saying, boy, I've done so much, but this is the one that's missing?
It really was to try and turn his head around to the positives, because you watch him go to any other oval that we go to, right? I mean, he dominates Iowa, Texas, Gateway, all these places, and fear isn't a factor. There's some drivers there that Indy is intimidating, from a risk and reward perspective, but he's not one that lives that way. So that's not it. Where with some of these guys, that's in the back of their mind at times, and you don't know till you know whether they're going to put it on the line or not. And I knew yesterday, once he sniffed the front, I knew it was going to be checkers or wreckers for him. He was not going to let that opportunity get away, without giving it absolutely everything. And thankfully it didn't come to that, but that's where he was after the race. He told me that. He said, there was no way I wasn't coming back with without this checkered flag. If I came back, it was going to be on a wrecker. We've always had the full confidence in him, and it was a matter of him keeping that confidence. And, you can talk about physics and race setups and all that other stuff, and we had a great car. You have to have that. But really, this place is about getting drivers like him the confidence that they can do it. And, he had that. I could tell race morning that he was in a mindset of calmness. And, he knows what's on the line. You don't have to put any pressure on him. He puts more on himself, really.
Tim, my last question for you would be this. When you go back to when Josef, it seemed like just an inevitable fate that Josef Newgarden was going to end up with Team Penske, and that when he did, he would win the Indy 500. But when you go back to when he was a first coming through the ranks, whether it be in the then Indy Lights, which is now Indy Next, or when he was driving for Sarah Fisher and then Ed Carpenter and that combined team and then Ed Carpenter Racing. But before you signed him, can you recall for me the moment? Was there a moment where you saw Josef Newgarden race as a young racer before he was an employee of yours and said, that's the guy we need to get, that guy's different?
When he got upside down at Texas and got out of that thing and, was racing the next week, I think it was Elkhart Lake or whatever with the broken
wrist, yeah.
I think I have that right. But after he got upside down at Texas and the way he came back after that, his mindset, you knew this guy was different. Because you don't get in that kind of accident and, take the approach he took, to get to the next step. And what drove him, to figure out how to stay in the car, how to succeed, and what he went through to do that without being special.
Was there concern that Indianapolis was going to be the one mental obstacle for him that he would not be able to shake?
Until you do it, I think it's always a concern. But that doesn't mean you don't have the confidence that it can get done, right? I mean, I think that there's a difference there. And, without a doubt, from internally, it was really a matter of all of us, being sure he understood that, hey, this was about us being sure we gave him what he needed to win the race.
Tim, last one for me. What were you thinking when you saw Josef park that car in the yard of bricks and all of a sudden he's venturing through gates and fences I didn't even know it was possible to get to the crowd at IMS?
I learned something yesterday because obviously I was there when Elliott was the first one to stop on the front straightaway and climb the fence. And so, for me, I walked there and I got to the fence and the guys were on the fence and I trying to find the driver, right? He was the one with the helmet on, I think. And I don't see the driver. And then I see him on the other side of the fence. And then I'm like, well, how did he get there? So I never saw him go under the fence. So it took a little bit for me to understand really what was going on there.
Pretty cool moment. His emotion
pretty cool.
Certainly told the full story there. Tim, congrats. I know these don't, you obviously have, this is not your first time, but I'm sure it doesn't get old, and especially watching Josef get that kind of off his back had to be pretty special. So congrats. Enjoy the celebration as you obviously will shift to Detroit at some point this week, but enjoy it, Tim.
Appreciate it. Thanks for having me, guys.
It's Tim Cindric, president of Team Penske, right there on the Payless Liquors hotline.
Tim Cindric, by the way, noted Guns N' Roses fan.
Really?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, should have asked him if he can use his juice now to get Guns N' Roses to IMS.
He's had a hell of a career.
Greatest band ever assembled. Mark is staring at the floor.
I'm not just,
Is that a debate we should get into here on this Monday holiday?
Right.
I thought it was interesting, Jake, the line, about Josef and this place and ovals in general. Fear is not a factor. For how many of those drivers, obviously they are in like the 0.1 percentile of they obviously have no fear, but to do some of the passing and the moves that you see yesterday, to be in the top 5 late in the race, to be one of the final few standing, you've got to be in the 0.1 percentile of that 0.1 percentile to make sure that you have that opportunity. And, when he didn't do it down the main stretch, that was the last chance, Jake, right in front of you pretty much. And he goes the outside and pulls it off, and it's certainly a last lap that we'll remember for decades and decades.
Yeah, I can't really even remember the pass. Like, it happened so fast, right?
I thought he gained so much on him in between 1 and 2.
He did. Well, he really, going into 3 is a great passing zone, and, guys try to get a run, and he did, and he made it stick. And he made it stick by getting creative, going down the front stretch, coming off 4. But that was a cool moment, for certain, cool moment. And you know what? Kudos and credit to Marcus Erickson, who put himself in position and did everything that he could to win that race, and I think absolutely showed his competitiveness by standing up for himself about the ruling of the red flag, but also did so in a classy fashion by saying that he understood the accomplishment of Josef Newgarden.
And Jake, in the modern era, we don't have back-to-back winners.
Correct.
Elio, it's
21 years since it happened, and it had been 31 years before that.
Just, it's not like you don't have a ton of moments where guys are really knocking on that door even to have the opportunity to be close, and he was right there with a golden opportunity, certainly there late in yesterday's race. So Josef Newgarden on the podcast, Tim Cindric on the podcast, Doug Boles coming up in the 9 o'clock hour. We'll continue to chat about certainly a dramatic-filled 107th running of the Indianapolis 500. Kevin and Query here on Memorial Day Monday.
You're listening to Kevin and Query on 93.5 and 107.5. The Fan.
Thank you to Josef Newgarden and Tim Cindric. I just had them on. Those will be up on the podcast. Doug Boles coming up here at 9:30.
By the way, I would like to thank Kate Davis with IndyCar and my buddy David Hovis with Penske Racing, who lined up those two interviews for us.
Yes, thank you.
Obviously, Newgarden and Tim Cindric as well for their accommodation, but I can only imagine the number of requests and things that they all have going on. So many thanks to the professionalism of both for delivering in very short order.
Jack, I thought an interesting thing Tim Cindric just shared with us was his concern exiting Carb Day of, could we have the same thing happen to us in the first stint yesterday that we saw with Scott Dixon? I mean, Jake, I'm watching Scott Dixon getting just plucked one by one throughout that first stint.
And it was like a light switch, right? Like he went from running like really well to all of a sudden like, whoa.
It's like every half lap he's getting passed. And I'm like, what is going on here? And obviously the decision that Ganassi had to think about in terms of, when are they going to pit? And I think they stayed out there probably a little bit longer than Dixon wanted. But Newgarden, I thought, and I was going to ask Tim Cindric this, but I think he kind of answered it in one of the questions, just how according to plan did yesterday go for you? And it sounded like, once I got through that first stint, I thought it was just kind of a methodical build to the front. Like, Newgarden didn't have any, crazy restarts where he passed 5 people, or they didn't do some wild fuel or tire strategy to where all of a sudden, boom, here we are in the top of the field and the yellow fell in our way. It was just kind of all right, 17th to 14th in this stint, 14th to 12th in the next, 12th to 9th, and then just kind of slowly but surely they built and built and built. And then when you got to the end, you kind of had the handful of drivers pretty much up there all day long. Erickson, Ferrucci, Newgarden, and then I'd throw the 2 Aero cars in there that ended up both crashing out. I guess maybe Rossi, but I would throw Pato and Felix up there as well.
I thought Pato was the one. Man, late in that race, all of a sudden, when Pato made his final pit stop and came out, and I'm like, wait a minute, he's in second? Holy cow. I thought, and I'll give Pato credit for going for it there, in turn 3, in the battle for second at the time, I think it was. But I thought Pato was the guy that was in the catbird seat.
I wanted to ask you this because it happened right in front of you, Jake, that move by Pato on the inside of Erickson. I know it was the opposite end of the track from last year, but when that happened, I leaned over to my brothers-in-law and said, I think that is Pato trying to do something he maybe regretted a little bit last year.
That's a really good call. Yeah, that's a really good call.
Same driver, Marcus Erickson. Again, opposite ends of the racetrack. The move is different. It was an inside move in front of you yesterday. It was an outside move that he pulled back on last year with Erickson, and that Erickson then held the lead the rest of the way. And again, I'm not going to pretend like I know Pato O'Ward super well, Jake, but he does seem like a guy that certainly he's going to have some urgency, to say the least. And I just felt like what was that, lap 193 for you, 194, something like that? That probably wasn't needed at that time.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
If he hadn't been there last year, does he have that same sort of urgency?
I will defer to Davey Hamilton, who has not only been on the headset calling races, but has raced in the race. And Davey said, "Yeah, that's on Pato. He went too aggressive when he should not have."
And again, if he finishes 6th last year and isn't in that moment, does he maybe not have that same thought process?
Yeah, that's an outstanding observation. Somebody asked me this question, which is really good, and I want to expand on it a little bit, about Santino Ferrucci. Actually, we'll do it on the other side because there's something interesting about him that I want to point out. So we'll do that when we come back here.
Talk about the cheers for Ferrucci yesterday.
I know. It's Kevin and Query, 93.5, 107.5 The Fan.
And 107.5 The Fan.
Drivers, start your engines.
Fans on their feet, and the green flag flies on the 2023 Indianapolis 500 into turn number 1.
We've got trouble, guys, here at pit exit. We saw Rinus VK got sideways trying to peel out of his box, and Markey T-boned the pole sitter, Alex Palou. Who's the third line? And it looks like Rosenquist just tagged the wall, Michael.
He's into the wall. Felix Rosenquist spins. He'll slide back into traffic. He'll clip Kyle Kirkwood. Kirkwood goes upside down. Kirkwood slides around the outside retaining wall. Felix Rosenquist car at the exit of turn number 2. Oh my goodness, what a horrible crash.
Ward's going to go to the bottom of the racetrack side by side with Marcus Erickson. For second, Ward's not going to make it through. Caution flag's going to come out. Paulo Ward hits the wall. Josef Newgarden has taken the lead of the Indianapolis 500 with just 2 turns to go. Marcus Erickson on his heels. Newgarden into turn number 4.
Erickson looks to the inside, looks to the outside. Newgarden has a 2-car length lead.
Advance Auto Park twin checkered flag in the air. It's a battle at the start finish line, and Josef Newgarden will win the Indianapolis 500-mile race.
He shut him up. He shut them all up. Josef Newgarden has parked that car on the yard of bricks, and he's hopping out as we speak to celebrate with these race fans. Josef Newgarden has done it. Michael Young looks like he's going to go into the crowd. What a scene here in Indianapolis.
I was trying to put it off that, it's not going to define a career winning a race here, but everyone seems to want to make it a defining moment. And so for me, it's impossible to not look at it that way, and I'm elated to finally get it to work out.
So Josef Newgarden wins the 107th running of the Indianapolis 500-mile race. And most importantly, that means another name's got to go on my helmet.
Oh, I didn't think about that.
Got to coordinate that now.
Joseph with an F.
Should have asked him while we had him on.
I know.
I think you'll run into him here between now and the end of the year.
That's right. Hopefully, right?
As long as he doesn't hear what your original pick was.
I say Alexander Rossi. No, I'm listen. I told you that was taped before Carb Day. Okay, honestly, I did have a feeling that Rossi was going to win the race for a long, and then admittedly, I saw.
You did say Friday. I think Friday at the start of the show, you and I both said Rossi. And then you said Newgarden as the other choice. This was before Carb Day, to be fair. It was, Carb Day morning. Right. And then I said my second choice was Pato.
Yeah, once I saw the way that, because there was concern about where he was starting for certain. And once I saw the way that he was working in traffic on Carb Day at the end of the session, I was like, I told Nick Yeoman, and when we were at the parade, when they went past, when we go to the parade, Shannon's always like, now which one's which, and da-da-da. And Newgarden was in the middle, I think. But I pointed to Newgarden, and I go, that guy right there is going to win the race. There's your race winner. I felt like there was so much pressure on him every year to win it, that if he was going to finally win it, then, and for those that don't know, Josef Newgarden winning the Indy 500 was like Peyton Manning winning the Super Bowl. Yeah.
Phil Mickelson's first major.
Correct. Like it was not a matter of if, but when. And so I felt like if he was going to do it, it was going to be a year where he was kind of off the radar, which he was to a great extent this year. Now, you asked a question, before we get to the Ferrucci question, you asked a question, Mark.
Yes.
Go ahead and what you asked off air.
We played that rejoinder, and when Kyle Kirkwood flipped upside down on the broadcast, it shows him flipping his visor up as he's skidding upside down.
Right.
And I said,
great camera shot.
Yeah, I was like, looked horrifying. I was like, why would he flip his visor up at that point? Because I was worried about the shrapnel or like sparks or something getting in his eyes, and he flipped the visor up as he's still craning upside down.
Correct. So the drivers are instructed and basically trained that when they have an incident, if they are awake and alert, they are to flip up their visor so that if it's a multi-car incident, when the AMR safety team gets there, if they are assessing two different drivers, so let's say I'm the safety team and you and Kevin are in an accident and you come up and you have flipped your visor up and Kevin's is still down.
Like Rosenquist's could have been down.
Correct.
At that point.
So that means then I know, okay, we need to give our attention to Rosenquist because Mark has indicated that he is awake and alert. So gotcha. So my assumption is that in a crash like that, it's happening so fast that he's probably in a little bit of like an instant shock, but he realizes, okay, I'm supposed to flip my visor up because I am awake. So that's why he flipped it up.
Can you imagine like having that thought process?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I need to flip that up. Oh, and I'm also upside down.
Upside down at 200 miles an hour.
And there's sparks going on. I'm in the middle of the track. Hopefully no one hits me.
that whole sequence was wild.
Kyle Kirkwood had a nice run, Jake. He was up there for a while.
He did, man. And I'll tell you what, his car was starting to play nice. I mean, he had a nice car at the end there. Hey, Jake, is Santino Ferrucci going to be a driver that always is just hovering in the top 10, or does he have what it takes to get it done one day? That's a fabulous question. And here is the answer with Santino Ferrucci. I think Santino Ferrucci is massively talented and a super likable guy. And just a little like Santino Ferrucci is like my mom's a preschool teacher, and there's always the one kid in preschool that's just nonstop energy. When I was little, before I was born actually, but my parents, there was a next door neighbor kid they called Grenade, because whenever he came in the house, it was like a grenade went off, right? Santino Ferrucci,
what a hell of a nickname.
Santino Ferrucci is like Grenade, right? Just like he's just this constant energy, always upbeat, but. And I'm not saying this is fair or right, but there's a but. And I think he knows this. Ferrucci was running in Europe, and he was in one of the ladder series for Formula 1. Formula 2, I think, is what he was in. Formula 3000, maybe. I can't remember the series, but he got into some trouble over some alleged remarks that he had made about a teammate of his that were deemed to be, I don't know if it was racist or just inappropriate, whatever. And then he was fined for that, and then allegedly, not saying he did so, but allegedly later, he pulled his car onto pit road and pulled out a cell phone to show that, I don't know. I don't remember the exact things, but he got into some disciplinary problems.
Didn't he like wreck his teammate on the parade lap or something?
I think that's what it was, yeah. And it cost him not only, like disciplinary action within the series that he was racing in, but ultimately cost him his job, I believe. So he came with a little bit of a stigma when he got into racing in the United States. And that stigma you got the wild hair, and I love this about him. I mean, all of what I'm saying, now that part I'm not saying, but like his wild child streak, his grenade, that part I love about him.
Yeah, it's why he's on our Mount Rushmore of guests.
Right. I mean, he's super fun, right? He's got kind of wild hair, and he's always upbeat, and, he reminds me of Buddy Rice. Like, Buddy Rice was, like, wearing flat-brimmed hats and socks up halfway up his calf before anybody else was, with shorts and Airwalk tennis shoes. And Santino Ferrucci's the kind of guy that would show up at the victory parade, at the victory banquet wearing a tux and Air Jordans. You know what I mean? Like, he's that kind of guy. So, Santino Ferrucci 1,000% undeniably and unquestionably has the talent to win the Indianapolis 500. The question is going to become whether or not he lands a permanent ride with, and I'm not saying AJ Foyt Racing can't win the Indy 500.
And he is full-time this year. I know some people were confused by that. He is full-time.
But to be able to give yourself consistent knock-on-the-door chances at the race, typically, I'm not going to say you have to, but it certainly helps to be running for Arrow, Andretti, Penske, or Ganassi. And those teams are very buttoned up. And so that would be the one thing that may hold him back if he doesn't eventually get an opportunity with one of those teams. He's always going to be kind of playing underdog. And with AJ Foyt Racing, which is obviously put him in position to get a top 5, their first top 3 finish since Eliseo Salazar as a team. Getting 7 clean pit stops with that team is probably, while not impossible, a bigger feat than it would be with Ganassi or Penske or Arrow. I mean, that's kind of what it comes down to.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at Ferrucci this year, Jake, he was 11th at Long Beach. It's only top 20 besides yesterday. Two things. First off, I thought the cheer for him, it might not have been a Kanan or a Daly cheer or an Elio cheer, but it was pretty darn close in driver intros when he got to the lead. I'm sure his paint scheme, that car stands out to the vast majority of people.
Paint scheme's pretty awesome.
Yeah, in the facility yesterday. The other thing I've thought about is this. I mean, by all accounts, isn't Alex Palou leaving Chip Ganassi Racing for Arrow McLaren?
Correct.
Marcus Erickson is a free agent. It sounds like there is some debate about where he could end up. And obviously, Marcus Erickson, what he did yesterday, has only strengthened any sort of leverage that he has from a contractual standpoint. Could there be some openings, either singular or plural, at Chip Ganassi Racing? I don't know if Chip Ganassi strikes me as a guy that would be all in on Santino Ferrucci, and you'd be betting a little bit there, Jake, because he hasn't had a full-time season very often. Yes, he's raced great at the 500, but it's not like he has, podium finishes at other tracks. But boy, to me, that seems like a stock that I would want to bet on.
I'm telling you.
And I think he's matured a little bit from those days that you talked about earlier.
And I'm telling you, Dave Calabro late in the race, because I could hear this, that, they I don't know if you noticed, they put in new speakers at IMS.
Yeah, PA system.
Those speakers are, they're outstanding, because I had the headsets on, I'm up there broadcasting, I'm like, holy cow, it was, you could hear it clear as a bell, right? Calabro did the thing late in the race where he's asking, who's rooting for this driver, who's rooting for that driver. And Ferrucci might have gotten the loudest applause.
Yeah, late in the race, it might have been him.
He or Pato. He or Pato got the, it was like, holy cow. But how can you not like the dude, right? Actually, you know what? Can I humble brag here?
Why stop now?
I don't think you've ever stopped yourself from doing that before. I don't know why you would now.
Ask before.
That seems unfair.
Thankfully, it's a holiday audience, and not many are going to hear it. Although the podcast, I do think, will be.
Hey, Jake, didn't Felipe Giafone get a top 3 with AJ Foyt? I don't know if Giafone got a top 3, but when he did so, it would have been with Mo Nunn, I believe. The year that Giafone of the Castro Neves and Paul Tracy year, Giafone, I believe, was with Mo Nunn that year. But I had texted Ferrucci. This is why you love Santino Ferrucci, okay? This is why you got to love Santino Ferrucci. I don't know Santino Ferrucci, right? I'm not sitting here saying like he's a buddy of mine. I know him professionally from doing this show and doing the radio network. That's it, right? But it's difficult after the race because, as you guys know, we always try to get, let's get somebody that was also a storyline in the race. But it's like 7 o'clock after the Indy 500. The PR people are, feverishly working. It's hard to line stuff up through the PR people at no fault of theirs, just because they got a lot going on. So I sent him a text that just said, I can go through, insert name of PR person, if I need to, but I thought I'd go straight to the source in case they're busy. This is Jake Query. I do not expect him to know my name, but he would know the show probably. Wanted to see if you could, again, give us a few minutes on our morning radio show. You're a show and now fan favorite. I sent that at 10 o'clock last night. I get the following response. Thanks, buddy. If you could go through them, that would be great. Things are still pretty hectic at 3:09 a.m.
Oh, my goodness.
That's why you love Santino.
Just left Rock Lobster. The siren is blaring and heading across the street to Hot Box to grab some pizza.
That's why you love Santino Ferrucci, right?
Joey Molinaro says this, and I'm curious if you agree on this, Jake. And this would strike a little bit of a balance across generations, I think, with Santino Ferrucci. Joey goes, how much of that cheering is because he's in that 14 ride?
That's exactly. I said that.
People want to see Foyt back in victory lane.
Yeah, no, Joey, I think there's a lot of truth to that because we were discussing that over the intercom. Myself, Nick Yeoman, Michael Young, Kristen Airy, and we're like, man, what a roar for Ferrucci. And Nick and I both were like, well, part of that has to be because it's AJ Foyt, right?
Yeah, I think the combination of Foyt, what the car looks like, and again, the youthful energy I think connects to
the
people.
Youthful energy is a great way of saying it.
In kind of more of my or Mark's age group. We mentioned this earlier. Jake, it's the first time in quite a few 500s where I look at the top 10 and I don't think a single one of them you would characterize as surprised that they were there.
Agreed. Now the question becomes, which of the top 10 did you hear the least about over the course of the race? Newgarden, Erickson, Ferrucci, Palou, Rossi, Dixon, Sato, Daly, Herta, or VK?
Sato.
Yeah, 100%.
Which is kind of wild to say about him.
I wonder if that was Sato. Now, here's another one. It's another fun game to play.
I mean, hell, VK. So,
how many drivers yesterday?
I can't believe VK got top 10 after his antics.
How many drivers yesterday did we see their final Indianapolis 500?
Ooh. Well, certainly the man that finished 16th, right? Or was it 15th, wherever he finished? Well, I guess I should clarify because the other older gentleman finished next to him. Kanan's last. Elio not his last.
I would agree with that.
What's the situation for the guy who almost got in the top 10, Ryan Hunter-Reay?
Excellent question. I think Hunter-Reay absolutely proved that he merits somebody giving him, the proverbial one-offs at the very least, right?
He's 42. I didn't realize he was that old.
Yeah. I'll put it this way. Hunter-Reay, if Hunter-Reay wants to return, I think there will be opportunity for him to do so for certain.
Marco's last?
At some point, you have to start exploring that, right? Would not surprise me if that's... Although Marco, it does feel like is one that would announce it ahead of time so that we know that it's like his last 500. Because of just the fact it's let's face it, when Marco retires, I mean, that ends a streak of... I mean, what would it be?
Yeah, how long does that go back?
61 years of of an Andretti at least trying to qualify for the race.
I think it's a day that he didn't love yesterday. I believe a penalty on pit lane, and then Benjamin Peterson, I think, caused that final wreck that took him out of the race. But he said to us on Friday at Carb Day, Jake, this is definitely, he's got several more in him. But Ed Carpenter finished, what was it, 20th?
20th.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's why I didn't think of him, because he said he was going to that would be the one that he would race.
Right. Is there someone that we're missing here, Jake? I mean, obviously some of these, is Catherine Legge going to race again? What's Able Motorsports look like in a year with R.C. Enerson?
Yeah, Stingray Robb might have been a one-off. Although I thought he did an okay job, but that crash was, come on. Jack Harvey. Harvey I could see being... I think Jack Harvey is going to lose his ride with Rahal Letterman. But I could see Jack Harvey being a guy...
Doesn't that team just need to go back to the drawing board in general?
Well, yeah, no doubt. But I could see Jack Harvey being a guy kind of like what J.R. Hildebrandt's become. A guy that just gets a one-off each year or gets an opportunity or a ride opens. Tristan Vautier did that for a couple of years, or like Jay Howard did that for a couple of years. I think Harvey will get opportunities, but I don't know that he's going to be a full-time guy.
So what we know about next year right now, and again, we're 364 days, but we really enjoyed yesterday, so we would love for it to speed up. We know Kyle Larson for Tony Kanaan, is that right?
That is correct.
And then obviously we'll have to see.
And Larson was there yesterday.
What else? Yeah, they interviewed him on the big screen. Well, or maybe it was just over the PA.
I know Ryan Marine did on radio.
Maybe that's what it was. Gosh, they all run together.
I thought he was on the big screen. I think that's where I saw him.
I enjoyed the Tony Kanaan tribute from the drivers. I thought that was a nice touch. You could tell a lot of them are kind of ribbing him for, are you really retiring?
Right.
And I know I said this to lead off the show, and I probably said it in the 8 o'clock hour as well, but that back home again Indiana flyover with how low those planes were. I mean, you talk about chills.
Okay. So... Obviously, I think everybody knows, we put him on the air, about the Australians, right? So Michael was up in the perch with me, and then his 2 cousins, his brother-in-law, his workmate, and his 2 best friends from high school. So 7 of them were seated just below us. And occasionally they were looking up at us and waving and whatever. So to give a perspective from the other side of the planet about the Indianapolis 500, there were 2 moments where it was very clear that the Australians were like, holy cow. Would you like to guess the 2 moments, Mark?
The flyover, and I'll say Kyle Kirkwood's crash.
That's a really good guess.
Yeah. I was going to say maybe was there a flashing incident around them? That was my only other guess.
They did.
That was at the Snake Pit, Kev.
Yeah. Lap 120. Let's head over to that concert in there.
They did comment. They did go walk around between like lap 50 and lap 150. I don't blame them.
Yeah, sure.
But they so when the flyover happened, so I knew because I had the minute by minute. So I knew that the flyover was coming back. And I go, just wait. Because I pointed to Michael, because when you're up where we are, the flyover comes from the northwest. Mm-hmm. So you can see it coming from, a mile away. So I said to Michael, I'm like, hey, here comes the flyover. And then he was like, wow, whatever. And the Aussies like down in the row were looking up, like, ooh, So then I said, just so you know, it's coming back. He's like, what do you mean? I'm like, just wait. So I knew. So then all of a sudden, then they were coming from the east. So they were coming from behind us. So literally, like, we saw it before anybody saw it coming. And he's trying to yell down. He's like literally up in the perch trying to yell down, like, they're coming back. So that moment there. But the other moment, and this is the first time this has happened to me. I don't know why. Maybe I was tired. I don't know why. I always have, during taps, I always think about my grandparents, my great aunt, my great uncle that all lived in Speedway. I always think about them during taps. And yesterday was the very first time that I actually did like kind of well up. I've never had that happen. I don't know why it was yesterday versus the previous 37 of them I've been to, but it did happen. But during taps, I looked over at, like, I was standing there stoic, and as soon as it was done, I looked over at Michael, and he held his arm up, and the hair on his arm was standing straight up. And he's not American.
Right. But he mentioned that to us on Friday, Jake, the patriotism that he already felt, and that was Friday.
Yeah.
That he hadn't even gotten to Sunday pre-race. I tell you what, I welled up at the video right after taps. The video of the families discussing, who they had lost. That was right after taps, right?
I think that's right.
That's where and I don't remember that being played at that time. I don't remember that. I mean, I remember we've seen some, family-related military videos before, but I don't remember it at that juncture of the pre-race. Doug Boles is going to join us here in 5 minutes. Just a couple of rundowns on some figures from yesterday from a historical standpoint. Again, 5 laps led for Josef Newgarden. That's the third fewest for a winner. Dan Weldon, of course, just led 1 in 2011. Joe Dawson in 1912 led 2. 14 drivers led at least 1 lap yesterday. That ties 2013 for the second highest total. You had 52 lead changes. That is the third highest. The margin, 0.0974. Newgarden over Erickson. That is the fourth closest 500 ever. 92, 2014, and 2006, the only ones with closer finishes. And it's the third time in history that you had a last lap pass for the lead. Of course, Sam Hornish and Dan Weldon.
Who's the most random driver that led laps yesterday? I've got the list right here. You ready?
Probably got to be Ilott, right? Was it Ilott? I assume it was.
Power led a lap. Pato led 39. Rosenquist led 33. Elio led 1.
Really?
Yeah. Ilott led 5. Hunter Ray led 8. VK led 24. Herta led a lap. Sato led 2. Rossi led 4. Palou 36. Ferrucci 11. Erickson 30. And Newgarden 5.
Boy, doesn't it feel like Palou had such a great car.
He did, man.
Which I know is stating the obvious. Oh, Kevin says the guy who was on the pole had a great car, but... And, boy, VK just lost it coming out of the pits there.
He did, man. That car just went sideways. What the hell's he doing? God, I love VK, right?
Again, patience over 500 miles.
VK clearly had a good car, too, though.
Yeah, he got back up there. He got to 10th. And that's something I think Santino Ferrucci should be commended for. Patience over 500 miles. I was in some Indy 500 drafts and whatnot. I was like, wow, Ferrucci's going that early? I wouldn't trust him for 500 miles.
You know what I should show you guys since you're all over me on this? My cousin does one of those drafts every year. And he's neurotic about it. And he starts blowing me up before carb day. After carb day, when you see the non-toes, please send me who you think or the da-da-da. And on carb day, I should let me just show
Jake, I've said it before. The audio doesn't lie, and Mark has clipped it out, and I don't think you can argue against it.
I see Alexander Rossi wins the 107.
That was taped on Thursday, for Christ's sake. Right here. Friday, 12:18 p.m. What does the blue say to my cousin?
You got to talk into the microphone.
What does the blue say there?
It says Newgarden is going to win the race.
Okay. Thank you. Go ahead.
Looks like it's copy and pasted.
Sent at 4:30 yesterday afternoon.
Sent at 3:09 with Ferrucci's text.
Doug Boles in 5. Let's lead off the morning check down with, probably the best phrase in sports.
The morning check down. On 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan.
It's a fine Microsoft Paint job by you.
Mark's oldest would be very impressed by that. Game 7, that is tonight in Boston. Are we seeing history here?
We are. Celtics are going to become the first NBA team to win after being down 3-0.
Boy, Saturday night was wild. The Jimmy Butler foul, Al Horford fouling Butler, initially called a 2, changed to a 3. Butler hits all 3 free throws. And then you watch the final play for Boston, down 1. If you would have told Eric Spoelstra in the huddle, you're going to get a Marcus Smart 3, he would have said, okay, where do I sign up for that? So he gets probably what he wants. It's not Tatum. It's not Jaylen Brown. Smart shoots the 3, but Max Strus not paying any attention to Derek White as the inbounder. And really, if you watch the replay, outside of Bam Adebayo, I don't think anybody on Miami actually blocked out there. Derek White, such a heady play, tips it into the buzzer. Season still alive for the Celtics, and they are a 7.5-point favorite tonight in Game 7.
I am intrigued to see Jimmy Butler, the way he's been playing with his back against the wall in Game 7, how he shows up tonight, because he didn't have a very good
He was bad
Game
in Game 6.
Yeah.
It was surprising they were still in it, given how bad he played.
Reds over the Cubs, 8-5. Let me repeat. Cincinnati Reds beat the Chicago Cubs.
I don't think so.
That's a sweep.
We can move along. I don't think those are baseball. I think those are fake scores.
They're sweeping IMS today, and they were sweeping it around.
Orioles over the Rangers, 3-2. Cute fellow with yet another win. Hottest team in baseball, might I add. Indianapolis Indians short end. Columbus Clippers beat them 5-4. How about the Indiana Fever, by the way?
How about Kevin's A's real quick? 11 games losing streak.
Duh.
Ripping and roaring.
So the Fever ended, did I see that right? Was it a 20-game losing streak?
They beat Atlanta 90-87. They're 1-2 on the year.
Dating back to last year.
Yeah, that's right. They only won, how many games last year?
90-87, the Fever yesterday get the win. Malia Boston 13-7 for a pretty balanced scoring from the Fever. Grace Berger 6 minutes played for her.
If Aaliyah Boston played for the Celtics, her jersey would say Boston, Boston.
Doug Boles on the other side. Kevin Aquari here.
100. You are listening to Kevin and Query on 93.5 and 107.5. The Fan.
All right, you have heard him on with us all month long here on Mondays in May. He is Doug Boles, the president of the Speedway. Doug, first off, thank you for joining us here each and every Monday. I think it's been great previews and, of course, I guess a little bit of a review here on this Monday. What's the early 18-hour debrief been from you and your crew out there?
No, and first of all, we would just thank you for having me on, and thanks for continuing to talk about the Speedway that you guys do. But I don't know, the early debrief was the crowd was unbelievable. I think that was the biggest takeaway, just how many people really showed up, and the energy level in the venue yesterday was just unlike anything I've ever seen. This was my 47th race in a row, and just to see how everybody was so fired up, and I still every year get astounded that there's not a sound in the place when Taps is being played. It's just crazy. And I think generally, I think we feel like it executed better than last year. We still obviously have traffic things. We had an accident at Crawfordsville Road at 465 in the morning, which you can't do anything about that. But that kind of begins the challenges in trying to get everybody in and out. But just felt like we executed a little bit better this year, so that was good. Even on the concession side, it felt like it was a little better. Still have some work to do, but and then the racing was. The place just never ceases to amaze the way that it decides how to have finishes.
What were the final grandstand and maybe overall attendance numbers?
I don't know exactly yet, but it's 330,000-ish. So it was a really good crowd. A third of a million people inside this venue yesterday. It's crazy.
It's funny, Doug, and I'm not. The reality is this: when you have that many people. Let's be real here. It is impossible, literally impossible, is it not, to accommodate a smooth exit for all 330,000. I mean, that's just the reality, is it not?
Well, yeah. I mean, and I say that all the time. When everybody, 330,000 people, want to leave at the exact same time, and there's essentially, there's a couple roads really that get out, and you're funneling down into just one or two easy ways to get on the interstate. It's going to happen, and I would challenge other communities to be able to get people out as quickly as we do. I think our law enforcement do a great job of getting folks out. It's just, you're right. It's hard to do when you have that many people.
Doug Boles is our guest, the president of the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. Let's begin with this then. Aside from that, and I agree, I thought yesterday was, I think it might have been more crowded to the eye than 2016. I know it wasn't, but it felt that way. I mean, I just was astounded at the sheer volume of it. But what areas, if you really nitpick it, what did you walk away with concern of? I mean, other than the parking I get, but what are there areas yesterday that you thought these are still areas where we can learn?
Well, I still, like I said, I think we were better in concessions, but I still think we can continue to get better on that piece for sure. So that's one that that we just continue to focus on and try and make that better. I felt like our open gate system where people walk through the metal detectors, which are called open gates. I think that went pretty well. I think there's a couple things we could tweak to make that even smoother. So, but at the end of the day, I thought that was one of the best things we've done in a while is to allow people to get in, be able to go through a metal detector, keeping their coolers. So we want to continue to figure out how to refine that and make that work and make it simple for folks, but also know that we're keeping everybody as safe as we can. So that was definitely one. And, and then with an outdoor venue, like we start getting reports of bees at some point during the race. I mean, those are the kind of things that you're going to have weird things come up, and that certainly was one of the strange things that happened yesterday. We had a little bit of a water pressure issue yesterday for about 45 minutes that created some issues in restrooms, and that turned out that it was an external water pressure problem that was just impacting the speedway. It may have been impacting others in the area, but I feel like this is one of the better years I think that we've had, and obviously there's always things to learn and get better with.
And Doug Boles with us, the president of the Speedway. Doug, as best you can, kind of walk us through the Kyle Kirkwood accident, the bouncing tire, and what transpired from there.
I don't know that honestly, I haven't watched the accident enough to walk you through the accident itself. Jake's probably seen it more than I have. I was actually standing on the second floor of the pagoda when the accident happened and didn't really pay a lot of attention to it watching it. And then somebody says, "Hey, there's a tire off." And then and I asked the question if anybody'd seen where it went, and nobody really knew. So I went into race control and watched it on race control, and it was clear that the tire left the racetrack. So I got on a golf cart with Tyrone Garrison, who's our head of facilities, and a couple of state troopers and another guy with me, and we got in the golf cart, flew through the golf course, and went out back there. And honestly, I didn't know what we were going to find, but I wanted to be there to make sure if there were issues, we were handling it. And we were really blessed to, just have that tire land on a car and then go straight up in the air and hit a light pole as it went straight up in the air in the infield, and it just pushed it right back down to the ground. And so the good news is nobody was hurt. We had the gal who weird part about the gal who was working, whose car it was, her name's Robin, was actually working for my wife. So that was really kind of bizarre, and we spent a lot of time with Robin last night, getting her on the yard of bricks and having some fun with her. And she's gonna end up getting a new car. The biggest thing I think we just need is the series just needs to sit down and understand how that came off. Jake's been around long enough to know those tethers on those cars are really important and really effective. So it's odd that it came off. So we just need to figure out exactly what that is so that we can make sure it doesn't happen in the future.
Doug, it's interesting how the racing gods work, if you will, because it could have been tragic. We know that. I think everybody knows that. We can't hide from that. That's the one area of the racetrack where you have that gap, right? And in turn two, the wind gets tricky for the drivers because there's the grandstand, between the grandstand and the suites. And thank goodness that's where that tire went. But I agree. I mean, I said earlier, I've been to 38 Indy 500s. I know that sadly we have had 2 times in the history of 107 runnings where, one of them wasn't even a spectator. I mean, a tire went outside the venue altogether. Yep. And that was, 80 years ago. But does it lead to exploration of any sort of revision of like the fencing or whatever else, or is it just kind of one of those fluke things that, to be honest with you, it comes down to examining the tethering? Because I know with every accident, safety is then studied and becomes paramount.
Yeah, I think it's a little of both. I mean, I think the place where, obviously the IndyCar folks will take a look at, what caused that wheel and tire, and it's actually a wheel and tire, and the half shaft was still connected to it. They were, all in one piece. What caused that to happen? And then for us, just understanding, looking at the video and figuring out if, would a higher fence, a reasonably higher fence, helped it. I mean, if I haven't seen it enough to know actually how high it was when it cleared the fence, and then we'll just figure it out. But absolutely, we got to look at both and figure out how to continue to evolve and be safer.
Doug, you have 33 competitors in that race. All 33 would, if they were to win, make a deserved champion. Obviously, it is it's the greatest race in the world. That said, it is not your job nor mine to play favorites by any stretch of the imagination, nor am I asking you to.
Maybe a Connor Daly favorite would be.
Well, yeah, Connor Daly probably, would be a favorite. That would be acceptable, Doug. But Josef Newgarden will be a great champion. Would you agree? He will make a great champion and ambassador for the Indianapolis Motor Speedway.
No, I 100% agree with that. I think that's a really accurate statement, and I think you saw the crowd's reaction when he won. I mean, it was an amazing crowd reaction, and then my biggest thing as the promoter, the president of the Speedway, is whoever wins that race, I want them to embrace the experience, and I want them to celebrate it in a way that is fitting of how great this race is. And I think the way he got in the grandstands and celebrated, and you could just hear the emotion in his voice. And I've been fortunate enough to know Josef from a young age when he was racing go-karts with Connor, and they were running their Subarus together in the backyard and going out drifting in the snow and all those different things. So the two of them, Connor and Josef, both are really close, and just really cool for Josef, because I know that the longer you go in your career and you don't win the Indy 500, especially when you're driving for Penske, you begin to wonder, am I ever going to win the Indianapolis 500? Am I going to be the next Lloyd Ruby or, pick some of those guys from our history that were really, really good, Michael Andretti, guys that were really good and probably deserved to win the Indy 500 but never got to. And it's, I think for him, he knows that, and it's probably a big relief, and clearly he's going to help celebrate it.
Doug, I've got two before we let you go. And again, thank you so much for your time throughout this month. The first one comes, I guess, a little bit late Friday night. It was a popular question I was getting from fans. What happened with the Shaquille O'Neal snake pit situation? Because, I think at the start of the playoffs, Eastern Conference Finals going 6 games probably wouldn't have been the most shocking thing. So what was the issue there on him not showing up?
So Friday morning, we got a message from his agent that said, hey, we've got this game now on Saturday night, and we think after it's a late game, there's an hour post show, and then for him to get ready, he's maybe on a plane by 1:30 or 2, and then you got a couple hours to Indy. He's in Indy, call at 3:30. So they were just kind of walking through with the challenges, and then to be up and ready at 9. And so when that, but they didn't say that they weren't doing it. They just were it was kind of weird. So we began first thing Friday morning figuring out, okay, if he ends up not coming, what are we going to do? So we started spending a little bit of time Friday trying to chase down acts that were available and willing to come. And the guy that helps us with our music production actually does all of Deadmau5's stuff. So we talked about getting his name's Joel, but getting Deadmau5 to the racetrack, and he was going to be in Detroit, but he wasn't getting done with the show until 3:30 in the morning, Saturday night, Sunday morning. And then so we just started looking around, and then about, must have been 3 or 3:30, about the time the concerts were beginning, Shaq's team said he just doesn't feel like he can do it. It's just going to be too late for him. So that's really how it happened. And then we ended up settling on Valentino Khan last minute, literally. And honestly, I literally just sent them the contract this morning. That's how late it was. I mean, it was just a handshake deal. And the contract just was sent over to him about an hour ago. So, we were disappointed. And you're right. I mean, obviously, they knew coming in that they were going to do, that they were going to have music. Actually, we'd asked Shaq to play driver intro. Because we thought that'd be really cool, and he was really interested and wanted to. And they told us about 2 weeks ago, let's not do driver's intro because that's going to be even harder. Because at that point in time, they didn't know if he'd have a game that afternoon. So it's just been sort of a, just holding your breath, hoping everything worked out for Shaq, and unfortunately, the timing just got us.
Okay, and then the other one, and this is maybe more of a IndyCar specific question, but could you walk us through how the red flag decision gets made if you are involved, or know how that gets made?
Well, it really does get made by IndyCar, but generally, I think what happens is especially when you're close to the end of the race for the 500, I think we all agree. Internally, and I think most of our fans agree too, that the 500 miles, the integrity of 500 miles is really important. So a green, white, checkered thing feels kind of hokey to us for the Indianapolis 500, but we do want to do everything we can to end the race under green or as close to under green as we can. So in race control, when something happens, the Jay and the team make a decision. Go down. We can go to a red flag. And get the things cleaned up, and then time to go back and get this race started and get to the finish. So it's really a game time decision that Jay and the team make inside of race control, and we're doing everything we can to have a finish under green if we can, because that's what the fans want. But at the same time, I don't want to get to a situation where it's a green, white checker. The Indy 500 should just always be 500 miles.
Doug, I've been really worried since Carb Day, because we were doing our show, as you know, in the Pagoda Plaza, and a listener, very kindly and very much appreciated, brought up a beer that we had been talking about. And so I had it sitting in front of me, and then Mark Miles walked by and asked if I was drinking, and then I got paranoid that I'm going to get fired. Can you let him know that I was not actually drinking?
You were really nervous about that.
Totally, I still am.
Yeah.
Can you help me out?
It was all me, Doug.
Can you help me out, Doug?
Yeah, well, so here's what you can say if somebody comes and tries to give you a hard time. So I was on another radio station with one of our local sports guys on Carb Day myself. The on track was over, and I actually sat down and did drink a beer while on the air at 3:30. So
we're all good now.
But I had network obligations as well afterwards, right? So
here's the question. Well, I had obligations too. I had to still work with a snake pit, get people in and out. But I felt like one Miller Lite wasn't going to be a problem. And then I always figured if I did say even to the crowd there, I said hopefully Roger doesn't walk by. But my But my excuse would be Miller is a partner of ours, so I was going to just say I was doing some partner support. So
that's fair. That's fair. So I don't have that out. But lastly, Doug, let me say this. I've made a lot of this. I've probably beaten this dead horse too often, but it's a good barometer. I had the 7 guys from Australia that were here. And I asked them last night after the fact. Matter of fact, I videotaped it. I said, what was your reaction? And they were totally overwhelmed by the tribute to our military, which I found interesting because they're not American. But they said that was an incredibly powerful thing that they had the highest appreciation for. They were like, it was the greatest, truly the greatest spectacle they'd ever seen, and they couldn't grasp the enormity. But more so, they said the thing they loved the most was the friendliness and the overwhelming welcome they felt at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. So I thought I'd pass that along.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And we all joke about yellow shirts and whistles and all that because back in the day, you and I know that was what they did. I tell our yellow shirt team here that they're oftentimes, usually they're the only interaction that a customer has with somebody that actually is the Speedway, right? And so we expect them to be helpful and friendly, and they're there to make sure people stay safe. More importantly, there to make sure people, know what's going on, where to go, just to be really helpful. And so I do think the culture of the way we interact with our fans has changed, and I'm glad to hear that people are seeing that.
Doug Boles, president of Speedway, has been with us every single Monday here in the month of May. Doug, I know it's not necessarily a sigh of relief just yet for you, but hopefully a little bit of quiet-ish time. I know you got certainly a lot of events the rest of the summer, but thank you for all your candor here over the last month.
Well, thanks for having me, guys, and we'll look forward to doing this all again in 362 days.
Start the countdown. Man. Cannot wait. Thanks, Doug.
All right, thanks, guys.
Doug Boles, right down the Payless Liquors hotline. Jake, I assume Doug, among others, will be part of the victory banquet tonight, right?
Correct. I love watching the banquet.
Yeah, I always enjoy that. So that's coming up tonight. We'll chat about that, and then maybe Santino Ferrucci tomorrow.
I'm hoping Ferrucci we can get him, yeah. I think so.
Maybe he'll be out till 3 a.m. tonight.
I love it.
Catch him coming home after a late night out there. All right, we'll do it one final time here. Kevin and Query recapping the 107th running of the 500.
Kevin and Query on 93.5 and 107.5. The Fan.
For those just tuning in, the podcast will be up shortly. Josef Newgarden, Doug Boles, Tim Cindric. Pretty loaded show here, recapping the 107th run. You know, Jake, I always enjoy this show. It's fun to kind of put a bow on it.
It is, and I appreciate you guys also being willing to do it. Yeah, although, I don't know, were we given a choice?
I genuinely really love this month, and I hate that it comes to an end. I mean, I know, Jake, your knowledge and encyclopedia-like with everything that we discuss, but someone that's lived in this market my entire life, you just grow to have this incredible passion, or at least I have grown to have this incredible passion, and I love it. It's one of my favorite days of the year, and for me, providing a little bit of fun yesterday while watching it, but then certainly to try and provide some info for our listeners on it. May's always one of my favorites, man.
It's my 2 weeks of relevance has come to an end, so I can get a nap now, which is nice. But I appreciate, Kevin, I love everything about the 500, and I certainly understand that the sporting aspect of it, I probably love more than a lot of people. I think everybody loves the event of it, right? But it was a lot of fun yesterday to call the race. I appreciate everybody that listened to the race because we have so much fun doing it, and it literally is my favorite 3 hours. Calling the Indy 500 is my favorite 3 hours of the year. Christmas morning, birthday, whatever it might be, my favorite 3 hours where I feel the most comfortable and in my element is calling the Indy 500. And I wouldn't be able to do that if people didn't listen to it. So I totally appreciate that people did.
Thank you to you. Thank you to Mark. Mark, I know you're a big part of booking so many drivers for us this month as well. So thank you on that.
You're welcome.
As well. Favorite moment from yesterday, non-final pass? Is it the back home again in Indiana flyover? Is there another moment? The Australians, I'm sure, Jake?
Yes, I had so much fun with the Australians, man. They were so much fun. The parade with them was just
the
awesome.
Will Power video that you tweeted out was great.
Yeah, Power getting off the car and running and hugging him. I mean, we just had so much fun. But man,
the parade was a great time, by the way. The parade's fun.
I thought the pre-race is just so much fun. The first lap is my favorite moment, though. You know, I'm about to sneeze.
I thought he was going to get emotional.
I was not about to cry.
Yeah,
I know. The parade is cool. My favorite day of the year is the parade, actually. My favorite 3 hours, though, is calling the race.
Yeah,
I would 7 to 10 with us. Yeah, that works.
Yep, noted, Mark, right? Hey, don't lose that Rossi audio. I will say there was a moment at like 10 a.m. or 10:30 yesterday where I'm like, this is the best part of the month. Because you know it's about to start, and you obviously don't want it to.
And then you think to yourself, we're right on the heels of the worst part of the month.
Right,
in like 4 hours, we're like,
can we get one
God.
more red flag? Yeah. On that end. So a genuine thanks to Mark, to Jake, certainly everyone that's helped us book drivers this month, and all of you for tuning in. So if you were just now listening, again, the podcast will be up, but we'll be back tomorrow and all week long. Hopefully Santino Ferrucci will join us.